Hello and welcome to Purely Academic, your potentially educational podcast. This is the monthly stuff for January 2026, a brand new year. I am Dr. Jonathan Lack. I write about movies. I teach cinema studies at the University of Colorado, and my semester started way too goddamn early this year. What the hell?
And I'm Sean Chapman, high school English teacher by day, otaku by night, and I started this year by watching 2026 episodes of Digimon. That's only a very slight.
Yeah, it's a prolific franchise. There aren't that many episodes. It's not, it's not one.
There are not that many. I was not planning on watching as much Digimon as I ended up watching. I should also point out that I've already been working for a week, so fuck you and your...
I know.
My semester started too early this year. Bullshit.
Can I explain myself?
Yes.
Okay, so we ended, we didn't, finish finals week until, December 20th or so. Went right into Christmas, and then our first day of classes was Thursday, January 8th, for some fucking reason, because now we start on a Thursday. That's the new CU Boulder academic calendar. It's very weird. And... here's why I'm complaining, Sean. It's because I had about 2 weeks of break, and I have one of my 3 classes is a brand new class that I have not had a chance to prep for yet, all that much. Enough to make a syllabus, but I'm going to have to kind of, wing it in terms of putting the lectures and everything together. And it stresses me out. That's why, because they drastically shortened the winter break, and it bums me out.
Yeah, you still get a slightly longer winter break than me, so.
I know, I'm sorry. Look, it's just taken as a given that nobody has it worse than public school teachers, but, you chose this, Sean. Take your lumps.
Yeah, but, that's the one thing you get as a public school teacher is you get to say, my job is fucking worse than yours, unless, you're really working some nightmare job.
Yeah. My job is not worse than yours. I totally get that. I'm very privileged. I just wish I had more time to prep for my new class. That's all.
Yes. Very understandable. And one thing you could do is you could procrastinate by watching an ungodly amount of Digimon.
I procrastinated doing other stuff, but that's okay. We will... We have lots to talk about today. On the show, one thing we're going to go over is my top 10 films of 2025 list. I published that on jonathanlack.com about a week ago on January 6th. And I did not, usually when I do my top 10 films list, I record a little solo podcast sort of reading through it and release that. And I just did not have time to get that produced and out the door by the time I wanted to publish that piece. And so I thought, fuck it, we'll just talk about it on the normal podcast. And it'll be a different way of doing that for people who just hate to read and only like to listen to audio. And we will talk about that today. Next week, or later this month at least, on Purely Academic, we will have our annual top 10 video games of 2026, or 2025 episode, not 2026. That would be, we haven't played any 2026 video games yet. And who knows if we'll even get to 10 next year. Every year, we almost miss it. But this year, we do have a top 10 video games list for you that we will both do, but that'll be on the next episode. And we'll talk about some other stuff today, including, it sounds like, Digimon.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I was, our original plan was we were going to do the top 10 video games one first, but you wanted some more time to play some games. So now I get to talk about Digimon Story Time Stranger outside of just having to do it on the top 10 list, which I'm honestly happy about.
Yeah, yes, the plan was to talk about it today, but a couple things happened, and I'll talk about it more on the top 10 episode. One of them is I finished a game that I knew was going to be high on my top 10, and I was really excited about it, and I finished it, and then I realized there was a separate true ending that would take me a bit longer to get to, and I didn't want to talk about the game without seeing the true ending. So you guys can guess what game that is, but that's one of the reasons, Sean.
Yes, but I'm very excited. It's good to get in here and just do a stuff episode.
Just do a stuff episode, starting with a little bit of housekeeping. 2 notes on Japanimation Station, our anime podcast. Season 6 of Japanimation Station, the Tomino-thon, work has been progressing steadily on that. We're very excited to share it with you. It will be coming in the first half of this year, fairly soon in terms of premiere. We still can't reveal the exact premiere date yet. We're working on nailing that down, but it's going to be exciting. We will have more details soon on that, and I would say by the end of January, there will be a little mini episode in the Japanimation Station feed and something here in Purely Academic giving more concrete details on how that will all be rolling out over 2026. Obviously, we meant to premiere the Tomino-thon in 2025, but that was a wildly optimistic prediction because this season has taken a lot of work.
Yes.
Yeah.
I bought books.
You bought books. We've been watching full 50-episode anime again, which we haven't done other than Clannad. But even then, isn't Clannad 2 26-episode shows? Or is it?
Yes, it's Clannad and Clannad After Story. I mean, you are forgetting about the 60-something episodes of Dragon Ball GT you made me watch.
Okay, yeah. Well, we're forgetting about that, because of repression. On my, you just hold on to it out of spite, and I understand that. But yes, other than that, we've been doing a couple 50 episodes shows for this Tomino-thon, but it's a really good season, and I'm very excited to share it, and that'll be coming soon. I did also want to mention someone, one of our listeners, thank you, Jamie, one of our listeners, pointed out that the Japanimation Station website was redirecting to a very clear scam website, and I went, oh no, what happened? And not that like that many people, I think, access us through a www.com domain name anymore, but I still like to own domain names for stuff, and I've owned the Japanimation Station domain name since before we started the podcast, and apparently I don't own it anymore because there was a problem with my payment method on my domain name registrar last year, and they just didn't notify me. I looked back through my emails, and I just did not have it. But I did have a receipt from 2024 confirming the renewal, just not one from 2025. So it's gone, and I couldn't just re-register it. That was my first attempt. It is owned by someone else. I think the fact that it is a clear, phishing scam site means I could get it back, and I am working with our domain registrar, who still hosts it, to see if they can, get people to knock that off. I'm not sure what the rules around that are. In the meantime, I've just bought a new domain name that instead of JapanimationStation.com, it's Japanimation-station.com with a little hyphen in it, and that'll get you where you need to go, and we'll use that going forward. But just, in case you have a bookmark for it, it's Japanimation-station.com, not JapanimationStation.com. There you go.
Yes, it's, it's the internet. It's full of, It's the way the internet and scams work is they just find any crack they can get into, even if it's our little anime podcast. They're like, fuck, hey, there's a thing here. Let's scoop it up.
Man, Sean, if we ever wanted to do a really depressing topic, we could just talk for hours about how much worse the internet is today than it ever was before, how every utopian ideal that we grew up thinking about this thing has gone to flames. One of the main social media platforms is now just a child porn generator, and there are still people who say, I gotta be there because that's where the journalists are. I don't know. I don't want to be associated with the child porn site just out of pure self-interest. I don't want to be there. I don't know what you guys are on about. The internet is whack. What the fuck?
Yes, I'll say as someone who ended up looking at a list of the most popular podcasts in order to prepare for my top 10, monthly 10 segment this week. The internet is a dark, fucked up place, my man.
I know. It's the whole world is a dark, fucked up place. Obviously, we are recording this on Sunday, January 11th. The last week has been brutal here in America.
Yes.
And, we're not going to get into it today because it's not the kind of show we are, and hopefully we can just provide some other discussion and distraction from the horrible shit going on. But, man, bad times.
Bad times. That's a great way to segue, Jonathan, into what's going on in the news.
Okay, what's going on in the news is, the end of democracy and the global, international rules-based order and, all the good stuff we built up after World War II. That's what's going on in the real news. In our stupid neck of the news, Sean.
Yes.
Godzilla Minus Zero. This is the worst transition you've ever made me make. Yeah. Godzilla Minus Zero, which is the sequel to Godzilla Minus One, even though it it does sound like a sequel, because if you're going up, you're adding one, because it's negative 1 to negative 0, even though negative 0 is not a thing. It's fine.
You just have to disassociate the word minus from the number. If you take it as this is a movie called Godzilla Minus, well, now it's a fucking prequel. The problem is that there's no such thing as minus 0. Minus 0 doesn't exist as a concept. And so there's no way to square the circle of the title of this movie.
No, because if it's Godzilla Minus, then the sequel would be called Godzilla Minus 2. But if it's called Godzilla Minus, this is like Resident Evil 0 or something.
Yes.
But if you're going mathematically, it still doesn't work, but you can see where their brain kind of got off the track, right? You can kind of see where they took the exit. Anyway, we're excited for this movie because Godzilla Minus 1 fucking rocked. Godzilla Minus 0 has gotten its first poster and release date. It is coming November 3rd this year, 2026 in Japan. It'll be November 6th, 2026 in the USA. It'll be distributed this time by the good people at G Kids, who do a lot of anime but have recently branched out into some more live action stuff, including Godzilla. They did Shin Godzilla over last year. They released the 4K restoration in theaters. and on home video, which was cool. -1 was distributed directly by Toho, so it had kind of a scattershot release in the US where their first week was like kind of putting their toe in the water to see if anyone wanted Godzilla. That people really wanted Godzilla, and so then it got bigger. But now they're working with like a proper American distributor, and G-Kids will. They always do a great job at this, which is exciting, I think. And it is the most simultaneous launch we've ever had for a Toho Godzilla movie, where it's coming the same week to the US and Japan. A very different time than when we were kids, and you just had to hope you'd get a tape or a DVD years later or whatever. It's nice. The poster that they released is covered in clouds and or smog, fueling speculation that the film may feature the villain Hedora, who Takashi Yamazaki had previously said at a Comic-Con appearance he wanted to try reviving with modern VFX. And I mainly put this on the news outline, Sean, because I've never seen a Hedora Godzilla movie, and I wanted to ask you about that and are you thinking in the same direction that we might get one of the big villains in this one?
Yeah, I mean, it's totally possible. Although, I mean, when you say one of the big villains, I wouldn't say that Hedorah actually fits in that category.
Oh, okay.
Because Hedorah has only been in one Godzilla movie, which is Godzilla vs. Hedorah, also known as Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster, which is one of the very wacky, crazy 70s, late 70s Godzilla movie. Oh, not late 70s in terms of it's near the end of the run of Godzilla movies. It didn't actually come out in the late 70s, the mid 70s. But this is like the environmental one, as you might guess by the title name of the monster, Hedorah, the Smog Monster. And that's the one that features like a big, prolonged kind of dance club hippie scene. It's very psychedelic. It's a great fucking movie. It's got some of the goofiest Godzilla shit in it. But Hedorah is, despite the fact that it only appears in that one single film, it was never brought back for the Heisei era movies. It was never brought back for the Millennium era movies. It is a very memorable Godzilla monster, and I think it is a monster that fits well in our world because despite the fact that we have been making very overtly environmentally themed movies for 50 plus years at this point, shit has not gotten better on that front. It's only gotten far, far, far worse. And so it's an even more relevant monster in many ways now than it was back then. And so it would make sense that, like, I think if that's what they're doing, and who knows, it could very well be something totally different. It would make sense, like I definitely think it makes sense for a sequel to Godzilla -1 to be a Godzilla versus style movie, right? Godzilla -1 just was a Godzilla trampling Tokyo kind of movie, which is what you always do when you do make a reset things for Godzilla. But then you want to you can only do that so many times. And so you want to shift into a giant kind of, we're going to find another monster movie. And so I think the idea of let's not just do a brand new monster, let's bring back a classic one, but also bring back a classic one that has not been done to death. We're not doing another Mechagodzilla. We're not doing another King Ghidorah, Mothra, Rodan, some of those the really famous ones that have been in a shit ton of the movies. I think this would be a really smart one to pick. I would do either this or I would do Biollante from the Heisei era movies would be the two kind of one-off monsters that I think you could do a cool modern take on. So I'd be very interested to see if that's what they're doing here. Again, they could very well be doing a different classic monster. They could be doing a brand new monster. Who knows? But I think Hedorah would be a cool choice.
Yeah, and to be clear again, this is not just because, the poster has smog. That would be kind of a reach for the fans. Yes. It's because Takashi Yamazaki, the director, who has said he wants to do this, and we know he's a big Godzilla fan who would know this, stuff. I was looking this up, Sean, and I didn't realize I for some reason assumed Godzilla vs. Hedorah was one of the Heisei movies because the Heisei movies are the weird ones, and Godzilla vs. Hedorah is known as one of the weird ones, but it's a Showa movie, so I own this. I've got it in the Criterion set. I should go watch Godzilla vs. Hedorah. I actually put together a little Godzilla shelf for myself recently because I finally had some space to put it all out, and I realized I do own most of the Godzilla movies. The Heisei era is the one where I'm missing most of them, although I did just get the Criterion release of Godzilla vs. Biollante, and I really want to watch that because that movie looks sick. But I do have most of the Millennium ones. I have all there's only 2 Reiwa ones so far, but I've got those. And obviously the Showa era set is just one nice set from Criterion, so that's convenient.
Yes, and Godzilla vs. Hedorah is a really wild one to revisit because it's just so of its time. It's so hippie psychedelic styled. And it was one of the really cool things about getting that Criterion collection is that this was one of the movies that it was just basically almost impossible for a very long time to see in any reasonable context in America.
Yeah.
And so it was one of those that I had kind of just dismissed for a very long time because I had only ever seen like an English dub VHS or a like rerun on TV of this movie. And then seeing it in Japanese with like a good format, it's, you know, it's a really weird one, but it is a very good one, as all those movies are. There are not actually bad Godzilla movies is the thing you learn when you actually get to see them in a proper context. It's like there are ones that are better than others, but I wouldn't say that there are any of them that are actually bad, especially if you watch things like the Gamera movies and you have seen what a real bad kaiju movie can fucking look like. There's a scale of film there, and Godzilla vs. Hedorah is a very fascinating movie to watch.
That's awesome. And I'm looking it up, and Godzilla Minus Zero has already finished principal photography. It actually filmed in multiple countries, not just Japan. It also had some footage shot in New Zealand and Norway, which is really cool. I don't think most Godzilla movies have left Japan for their production. I also was reading here, this is on the Wikipedia page, that apparently on December 10th, which was the last day of, or near the end of filming, Yamazaki finished filming and then ran over to the Tokyo premiere of the new Avatar movie, where James Cameron on stage expressed like how much he loved Godzilla Minus One and was excited for Zero, and said, "If you're ever falling behind schedule, let me know. I want to help direct the second unit." And Yamazaki laughed, saying, "That would be you're overqualified for that," basically, which I thought was funny.
Yes, I remember I saw some of those clips because it was for the premiere of that movie, and so there was just like a little section with Yamazaki and Cameron up there. Yeah. Cameron obviously had with a translator, and yeah, there's some very funny clips from that conversation.
That's awesome. All right, speaking of upcoming movies that will be coming holiday 2026, let's talk about one that's generating less hype. And I need to talk about this, Sean, because I find this so fascinating. So Avatar Fire and Ash, the third Avatar movie, obviously is out in theaters now and making bank. And Disney has done a little like stunt where every week that movie is in theaters, they've had a different Avengers Doomsday trailer attached to it. So it plays right at the beginning of Avatar. The first one, so if you saw Avatar opening week, it was a trailer revealing that Steve Rogers will be back for Avengers Doomsday. The guy who was in the last Avengers movie will be in the next Avengers movie. Breaking news. And it'll be Chris Evans, and now he's got a baby, and blah, blah, blah. Picking up from the end of Avengers Endgame where he's living with Peggy Carter. So you've got that. Then the second trailer was Thor, and it was Thor picking up from the end of Love and Thunder, a movie I thought they were going to kind of just ignore, but no. It's Thor is worried about his adoptive daughter who he got at the end of Love and Thunder, and you might be going, that happened in Love and Thunder? It did. It's easy to forget because that movie kind of you want to forget. But you've got Thor. Then the third trailer was about the X-Men, and it had very, very old Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen as Charles Xavier and Magneto again, and then a bit with Cyclops, played by James Marsden, who played Cyclops in the original Bryan Singer movies. And then this week, I haven't seen this one yet because it's not online yet, and I haven't gone to see Avatar in its fourth week of release, but it is Shuri and the Wakanda. So Shuri is the current Black Panther with the other Wakandan characters, and they meet Ben Grimm, and it's about how the Wakandans and the Fantastic Four will be in the movie. And what is funny about these, Sean, is the almost staggering, abyss of hype they have generated, which is to say none. I saw Avatar twice opening week, and it's an Avatar movie, a lot of people there, a lot of people excited to go see a movie, and I have never heard pin drop lack of enthusiasm in the theater at that Steve Rogers trailer. Nobody reacted. There were other trailers with Avatar that people were way more interested in, even for brand new movies. That Avatar also debuted the trailer for Steven Spielberg's new movie, Disclosure Day. People were like, oh, what's going on with this? The Steve Rogers one, people were just rolling their eyes at. You could just kind of hear it in the theater. From people I've talked to who also saw Avatar opening week, that seemed to have been the universal experience. The Thor trailer looked, I think people are just kind of over Thor at this point. He's been pretty overexposed, and his last movie was very bad, so this kind of looked meh. The X-Men trailer, some people were excited for. I was not. I think that is the lamest shit I've ever seen, in part because this is, I believe, the fourth revival of Charles Xavier as played by Patrick Stewart. If you go with Days of Future Past, Logan, his role in the second Doctor Strange, and now this. it's not like this is a legacy sequel to someone we haven't seen in forever. And then the big moment being James Marsden's Cyclops, the character the people couldn't get enough of, so they killed him at the very beginning of X-Men: The Last Stand. And then I haven't heard any real hype for the news that that Black Panther and the Fantastic Four will be in Avengers Doomsday is not news. So I haven't heard anything about that. I don't know, Sean. How have you been following these, and how baffled are you by it?
Yeah, I mean, I have not seen Avatar, so I've not seen this in like a theater experience. I did like look at the teasers because might as well.
They've been posting them online as they've been going. Yes. So like at the end of the week, so we'll get the Shuri, the Wakandans one in a couple of days here. But
I've actually seen that one from like just bootleg cell phone video.
Cam footage,
not out of like a burning desire to see it, but out of a like, oh, there's a link to this. And they're like 50 seconds long, so you're like, oh, whatever, I'll look at it. Yeah, I mean, I'm not excited for it. I do think the Steve Rogers one is by far the one that is the most thuddingly who gives a shit, because it's like, I like a Chris Evans as Captain America. I like that character, but there's also just like such a feeling that they finished that character. Like, it's like him and Iron Man are done by the end of Endgame. Like they have completed character arcs, they're finished, like they put it on a shelf. Like, yeah, sure, technically he traveled backwards in time, you could technically do stuff with him, in the same way that you can say multiverse or time travel, whatever, you can bring back Tony Stark, which obviously presumably that is basically what they're doing with their weird Doctor Doom being played by Robert Downey Jr. thing, who knows. But it's just, I think it's really hard to be very enthusiastic about the idea of them bringing back Captain America as played by Chris Evans, when we had a full character arc with them. It was very satisfying. Avengers Endgame was a great movie that was a very satisfying conclusion to that whole era of Marvel films. And I know because the pandemic makes it feel like it's been a huge amount of time since Endgame came out, but it has not been a huge amount of time. It has not been that long. It's like 7 years since Endgame came out? Like,
by the time Doomsday come out, it will be 7 years. Right now, it's only 6. So, yeah.
So it's like, I don't think, unless you're a kid, not enough time has passed for you to have any sort of like, it's fun to bring this thing back we haven't seen in a while. Especially with the way that media moves these days, everything takes so fucking long that, if you're doing this shit for like, and we're bringing him back, and aren't you so excited to bring him back? I mean, you might as well do that when they put out the Batman Part 2. It's taken so fucking long for that movie to actually get made that by the time they do it's some sort of nostalgia reboot sequel to its the original film in that franchise.
Because here's the thing, Sean. Here's the thing. Now that we've seen marketing, they are pitching Avengers Doomsday as an Avengers Legacy sequel. That is the thing.
Exactly.
Right, and Marvel hasn't had legacy sequels yet, really, because it's just been a constant thing since 2008. So there's been no room to do a big Marvel legacy sequel, but they're doing it with Doomsday, and it's baffling because A, there have been Marvel movies steadily since Endgame, it didn't go away, and 2, all of the things they're like teasing coming back, almost all of them have come back in one form or another. Like that Thor one is like, oh my God, remember Thor? It's like, yeah, I saw a movie with Thor like 2 years ago. What are you talking about? Chris Hemsworth has never stopped playing Thor at any point in his career. The X-Men are back. You've never let the Fox X-Men go away. This has been like a persistent thing. Fox didn't let the Fox X-Men go away. They revived, again, Xavier at least twice. They did Magneto once in Days of Future Past. But even then, Days of Future Past is I believe, 2016 movie. It'll only have been 10 years since the last time Ian McKellen played Magneto. It's not that long. And then they're also trying to do it with characters people have no nostalgia for. Like, I can understand liking Cyclops from other X-Men media, but the Cyclops played by James Marsden in the Bryan Singer X-Men movies isn't a character. He's barely in them. Nobody has nostalgia for him. In fact, it's like the chief complaint with those movies is that Cyclops is supposed to be the main X-Man, and he's not in them. He doesn't matter. He's just like the douchebag who's dating Jean Grey and cock-blocking Wolverine. So it's like, all of this is baffling to me. The idea that we're going to do Avengers, the Legacy sequel, when the last Avengers movie is only going to be 6-7 years old. And in the meantime, I did the math on this, Sean. Other than Thanos, every single character who died in Avengers Infinity War and Endgame has come back in one form or another, or the actor will have come back, like Robert Downey Jr. Like, we haven't had the chance to miss anyone. This, like, strategy would only work if there hadn't been Marvel movies for the last 7 years.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's actually kind of why the Thor one, even though I didn't like Thor Love and Thunder, and I only kind of vaguely recalled the thing with him having like an adoptive daughter plot point. Like that one actually played better to me, just purely on the sense of that one didn't feel so much like a legacy sequel, more as like it's just Thor's in another movie because he's just continued to be in movies. Again, not in a way that made me excited for it, but in a way that I didn't have like this incredibly dissonant reaction to watching that trailer. That the Steve Rogers one is just like a weird feeling because it is this like, and we're bringing him back, and the character you've all missed for a few years because you haven't seen him in a while, but we've also been making other Captain America stuff with the other Captain America guy, and we've been doing that shit, but now here's the white one back. It's like, okay, fine. And then the X-Men one is, is brutal just in the sense of you really feel the passage of time with Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen there. Where you're like, why do we have to wheel them out against like these characters? Like, let them go do other stuff. The Cyclops one, I feel like they are banking 100,000% purely on that he's in the iconic Cyclops costume from the 90s that you would recognize from like the old cartoon and stuff like that in the old Capcom fighting games. And that's at least a like, hey, they put him in the fucking costume, which is something that I'm at least happy for James Marsden that he got to fucking, well, maybe he got to wear the costume, I don't know, maybe they CG'd it on him.
With Marvel, I mean, Tom Holland I don't think has worn a Spider-Man suit in years. They just CGI'd that on him and those movies look like shit, so yeah.
Yeah, but hopefully they made a practical costume and he got to actually wear an actual Cyclops costume other than a leather jacket.
Because here's the other element here, Sean. The reason Avengers Doomsday is the way it is because of Deadpool and Wolverine, which is the most successful Marvel movie other than Spider-Man New something, whatever it was.
No Way Home.
No Way Home. Other than that, that's been the most successful Marvel movie post-Endgame. And, they put Wolverine in the yellow Wolverine costume and people went apeshit for it. I think Disney is dramatically underestimating how much Deadpool and Wolverine made money for Hugh Jackman. I think Hugh Jackman is personally responsible for at least half of that movie's gross, and the other half is Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool. I don't think Deadpool and Wolverine is the big movie because Channing Tatum came out as Gambit or whatever else was doing there. I think Disney and a lot of fans don't realize that for the average moviegoer, X-Men just means Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, and none of that other stuff really registers. I don't think there's going to be the same applause moment in the theater if Cyclops comes out in his 90s costume, because I should say here, I'm not shitting on James Marsden. James Marsden is a really cool actor. I like a lot of his other stuff, but that performance doesn't have that cultural cachet. Hugh Jackman as Wolverine had that cultural cachet, and they're just going to try to recreate it with everyone else, and, good luck. I don't think it's going to work.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is that none of this is a shock or a surprise. They're being played as and now this character will return in Avengers Doomsday. And then they have the clock at the end.
Yeah.
But it's you already did this when you had your weird Twitch live stream or whatever the fuck it was, where they had all the chairs with the names of the actors and stuff that are going to be in the movie and the characters. So it's we already know. If you followed any news about this movie, you'd know that all these people are in this movie. There's not there's not a sense of surprise or reveal, and I can't believe that they're getting Thor in another Avengers movie. I can't believe that Captain America, my God. I can't believe that Black Panther and the Fantastic Four are going to be in an Avengers movie. Because, they're not even, most of these, other than the X-Men, are not characters that are in any way, shape, or form a surprise anyways. But even if they were to be, they can't be because we already know that. And we already knew the X-Men Part 2. This is all a complete known quantity. Again, and I'm not I don't give a shit about these movies anymore. I don't watch all the Marvel movies anymore. I'm not following the news about these movies obsessively, and I already knew all this stuff just as a casual observer as someone who used to watch these movies. And so I do think that like a lot of the audience is already basically aware of this fact, whether they give a shit about it or not. And so I don't know how you're supposed to generate hype and enthusiasm for this movie based on the way they're doing these teasers. Like if they revealed something enticing about the plot or like an interesting team up, which, seeing Shuri, Black Panther, and Ben Grimm is not an enticing team up. It should have been Namor the Submariner and Invisible Woman if you want to have a like comic book. There's a thing between Namor and Sue Storm that you could do. You could do some like comic book nerd shit and have something that's a little bit spicier in the teaser. But all these is somber. Oh, I am a superhero and I have some sort of child something or other. I don't know. And that is it. And that's as far as these teasers go.
I will say the X-Men one is the one that depresses me the most. Not because I don't love Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen. I do love them, actually, and I wish they were getting to spend their final years doing better stuff. Because it just it feels like elder abuse at a certain point, and it makes me sad. But moreover, like, the one thing that seemed fucking exciting out of Disney buying Fox was, oh good, we're going to get a new version of X-Men. We're going to get, like, the Marvel version of X-Men, and that would be cool. The way we got Marvel version of Fantastic Four, and that was cool. But, like, X-Men has an even bigger potential because, like, X-Men to me seems like it was the thing that could have fixed Marvel in this era. Of, like, the problem was all their existing characters weren't working, they weren't introducing new stuff, and their existing attempts at, like, creating an interconnected world wasn't working. X-Men's right there. Like, that's the thing that I feel like you would refresh it with is, like, because most actual X-Men stuff has never been done on film. So there's, like, a ton for you to mine, and you could do a Disney Plus show introducing them, then you could branch off and have a movie, and, like, you could feel like you're doing a new Marvel Cinematic Universe with them. But we're just getting more of the Fox X-Men from when we were kids, and I don't know when, if ever, they'll be able to branch off into a new one because they've just renewed everyone's cultural association with these characters with these really old superhero movies. And, like, I guess we're just never getting Marvel X-Men, and that bums me out. That really bums me out.
Yeah, I'm with you, and it's... And if their plan is to be like, oh, and now we're sunsetting the Fox X-Men and we'll introduce new X-Men or something, like, it just feels like you're kind of shitting on whatever, like, new version of X-Men you could do by reassociating it and reattaching it to this old version of it, which they had already done because they brought back the Kelsey Grammer version of Beast in whatever fucking movie that happened in.
The Marvels. That was the post-credit scene of The Marvels, the movie nobody saw. I saw it, and I was sad I saw it.
Yeah, the only thing from that movie I saw was that scene. Because again, it's like my relationship to Marvel at this point is the, like, some random clip about it gets talked about online, and I'm bored at lunch at the high school I work at, and I've got 20 minutes to eat lunch, and I'm looking at my phone and I have a sandwich. I'm like, oh, fuck it. I'll look at this for 60 seconds of my life. Why not? That's where my interest has fallen for this whole project.
It's just funny to me. I think the general, like, movie-going public does not really grok yet what free fall Marvel is in, and, like, Disney with them. Like, guys, there were 3 Marvel movies this year. This will be the first year since '08 that Marvel will not have a movie in the global top 10 box office. And that's already decided. The only superhero movie in the global top 10 is Superman, and kind of just barely. And that Superman is beneath F1 and the How to Train Your Dragon remake. Like, superhero movies, and this isn't even because of the domestic box office. All those Marvel movies did okay in America. It's because the international box office has just flat out stopped watching superhero movies. Like, they're done with it. China is done with it. China is where Avengers made all its money. Like, this movie cannot be profitable unless it reignites the international box office, and I just don't see that happening kind of with any superhero movie. Like, if James Gunn's Superman wasn't going to be the one to do that, I really don't know what would be at this point, because that movie was awesome and people loved it and it was hyped and all this stuff, and it's new, all sorts of stuff, but, just did not ignite the global box office. The movies that have ignited global box office this year is Zootopia 2, which has become the highest grossing American film in the history of China, Avatar Fire and Ash, really, really big globally, the Lilo and Stitch remake, stuff like that. And then anime stuff like, Demon Slayer, Infinity Castle. it has not been superhero stuff, and I don't think Avengers Doomsday is going to be the thing to do that. And I think at that point, Disney's going to have to make some really tough calls on what is one of the like pillars of their company, because it's not the one making money anymore. And the verdict is out on Star Wars. We'll see if we've got the new Star Wars movie coming in May, the Mandalorian movie. We've got the one directed by Sean Levy. I forget which one. What's that? It's like Star Wars Starfighter or something like that. That's coming next year. So we'll see. I think the Mandalorian movie will do well, but the verdict is out on whether Star Wars will still be a big box office draw. And Star Wars was actually never that big in certain global markets like China. So yeah, right now it's like animation and Avatar that's doing well globally. And Disney is over leveraged on things that aren't that. Let's just say.
Yeah, it just feels like with their major franchises, outside of like their obviously their kind of classic stuff that can still be big hits with their like live action remakes or whatever, that the Marvel and the Star Wars stuff that they have, hitched a lot of their wagon to, they just really have fucked them. Like, and they failed to pivot it, and they attempted to pivot in some ways, and just have like not managed to figure out how to do it. And I think, to be a little bit fair to Disney, I think one of the things that did compound this for them is that those pivot points happened during the pandemic. And so like it hit at that point, and I think like that is also one of the things that like really fucked them over, is like that it was this like big turning point where they had, at least with Marvel, they had brought it to a really rousing successful conclusion with Endgame. With Star Wars, they shitted it out by the end with Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, where the fuck the name of that movie was. But regardless, in these kind of like transition periods, they both landed in that pandemic region, and I just think like they made kind of every wrong choice with both franchises. If your goal was to make them big and keep them big, both of them feel very small. And there's still lots of good Star Wars stuff being made. It's just on a much smaller scale, or it's on Disney Plus, and it's not going out there, or it's stuff like the Bad Batch, or they're like the kind of shorts they do with Star Wars Visions. Those things are very cool, and the fans really enjoy them. But if your goal is to have like is to be like one of the highest grossing movies of the year, I don't know if they're going to be able to do that with Star Wars. At any point. I mean, we'll see with the Mandalorian movie. I think the Mandalorian movie will probably do fine. I don't think the Mandalorian movie is going to do massive fucking dollars, on a worldwide scale. I would be kind of surprised if it did that well.
I kind of think I think the Mandalorian could do it. I'm not like confident in this prediction, but if you forced me to put money on it, I would say that movie breaks big. And I'll tell you exactly why, Sean. There's a couple reasons. One, The Mandalorian is like a huge hit on Disney Plus. Like, it is a crossover thing in a way that, like, look, we all love Andor. Andor is not like a big crossover hit for Star Wars. It is the one your weird leftists on Blue Sky watch. And yay, they have good taste. Andor rocks. But like, The Mandalorian is the one everyone watches. But I will say, I forget what movie I was at, but I took my mom to see a movie, and they showed the trailer for The Mandalorian and Grogu. And she's never watched a second of The Mandalorian. I think the only recent Star Wars thing she even saw was The Force Awakens, and that was 10 years ago now. But Baby Yoda, Grogu, shows up on screen, and she was like, oh my God. And she like was like, oh, this looks great. She like thought Baby Yoda was so cool, and she's like, we've got to see that. It's like, is this like a prequel about Yoda? And I'm like, no, he's actually an existing character named Grogu. And I like explained it to her, and she's like, oh, I should go watch that show. And I think we should never underestimate how fucking adorable Grogu is and how many butts he gets in seats. Grogu is like, he's fucking cocaine for the box office, I think is the possibility here. I think Grogu's going to get butts in seats.
I think that's definitely a possibility. I certainly don't think the movie would be a flop. I think for me, the thing I'm curious about is if the kind of like more muted reception to the Book of Boba Fett and then Mandalorian Season 3, which felt like did not have anywhere near the kind of cultural presence that Mandalorian Season 1 and Season 2 did. And also just the like, have they just so trained people to watch this stuff on Disney Plus that are those people going to go to the movie theater or just wait for it to be on Disney Plus? That to me is like the really big question mark with the Mandalorian movie, is I don't know if and they've only done like the one trailer. They haven't like really started the whole marketing machine for it and to see how they pitch it. But at least that one trailer did not, to me, I mean, I saw that trailer, and my question I had for myself was, am I going to bother to go to the movie theater for this, or will I just wait for it to be on Disney Plus? And if I'm thinking that, I have to imagine that there are a lot of people that are also in that boat.
Yeah, we'll see. They haven't really started the marketing effort in any kind of like real force. So we'll see where that goes. Anyway, Sean,
what you did there in any real force.
I did not mean to. I didn't.
Pretty good, Jonathan.
But it's the Mandalorian. I guess Grogu uses the Force. The Mando doesn't use the Force, but Grogu does. So yeah, there will be the Force in that movie.
We all use the Force, man. It's part of all of us. It connects all of us together, bro.
All right, Sean, we've spent some time looking forward on the news. Do you want to spend some time looking back on the top 10 films of 2025 with me?
Yes, I'm very excited. I have actually seen some of these movies, which is the thing. I was like shocked when I looked at your list. I'm like, oh, I did watch some new movies this year. That's right. And not all of them were only anime movies. Most of them were anime movies, but not all of them.
Well, I'm curious to hear then, Sean. You've taken a look at my list, I assume. So
yes,
you know what we're going to talk about. Okay. So I published this on jonathanlatt.com. What I think I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go through. I'm going to start with I did it as a top 20. So there was like a second 10. I'm going to list those second 10, and then we can talk about any of those that I or you find interesting. But my runners up, and I think this was a good year. Like I will say, I didn't realize until I kind of made the top 20 that I would have been just as happy with my second 10 being a top 10. Like I really liked a lot of movies this year. So my second 10 was The Day the Earth Blew Up, the Looney Tunes movie that David Zaslav buried and Catch-Up Entertainment rescued and put in theaters, which is good because if you like Looney Tunes, you should see this movie. It is, it's been decades that Warner Brothers has done different versions of what a Looney Tunes movie could be. A lot of them back in the 70s, 80s, 90s were basically compilations of shorts with new wraparound material. You had in the 90s, you had Space Jam, you had Looney Tunes Back in Action, but we've never really had the idea of a Looney Tunes cartoon that is a feature film. And that's what they've finally done here, and it's really fun. And it's like real Looney Tunes heads made this because the movie is about Porky and Daffy, and Bugs Bunny is not in it. It's a proper-ass Looney Tunes movie, and it's very good. And I just, as the animation aficionado, I had to put it on the list. My 19 was Bong Joon-ho's Mickey 17, one of 2 appearances by Robert Pattinson on my list. I loved this movie. A lot of people thought it was a mess, and it is a mess, but it's a mess by Bong Joon-ho, and Bong Joon-ho's messes are more interesting than most people's rousing successes. So I think this movie is 100% worth watching. If for no other reason,
movie where he's Robert Pattinson's playing a clone or something.
Yes.
There's where a weird number of movies have felt like this year where there were a lot of clone twin style effects. I didn't watch any of them, but I only sort of know about it on the periphery. So
I think you'd like this, Sean. I mean, it's Robert Pattinson plays a guy who has signed up for a space mission where they basically print copies of his body that keep going and doing dangerous work. And when the body dies, a new copy is printed. And the turning point in the movie is when suddenly several of the 2 specifically of him are surviving at the same time, which is not supposed to happen. And so then you've got Robert Pattinson in a dual role. And the whole time he's doing this cartoon New York accent. It's crazy. I love it. My number 18 was Wes Anderson's The Phoenician Scheme, which is... Wes Anderson has made so many movies lately. This is his 4th feature film of the decade so far, and we're only halfway through the decade. This is probably my least favorite of his recent movies, but I still really enjoy it. I just rewatched it with my family, and I do think it is his funniest movie. All Wes Anderson movies are comedies on some level. I think this one maybe has a little less human impact than some of his other films. I do think it makes up for it by being screamingly funny, and I very much enjoyed it. It's Benicio del Toro as the main character in a Wes Anderson movie. That alone is makes it worth seeing. My number 17 is Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. Controversial movie because some people loved it, some people hated it. I loved a lot of it. I think it's got problems, but it also has Tom Cruise hanging from a biplane doing some crazy shit, and I enjoyed that.
Yeah,
did you ever see this, Sean? I'm curious.
I never saw this. Okay. I don't know why. I've seen all of the Mission Impossible movies. I do think that there is something about them doing the part 1, part 2 thing. I know that they did the and now we're not calling it part 2 anymore because that's a bad idea to have done it. And I do think it was just a bad idea to have done it in the first place because there is something about it that it just made me not feel a compulsion to go see this movie. And I think part of it is that it was part 2 of this big action spectacle movie that I really love the action spectacle stuff of Mission Impossible. but I think you need something, for me at least, that is a little bit more character and kind of plot based to make me want to see the part 2. Because I don't know, there's just something where it's like, I saw him jump the fucking motorcycle off the mountain, and all that shit was cool. And it just, like, I think it robbed the sense of urgency of wanting to see the movie the way I had for the part 1 film.
Yeah, and, this one definitely, you can tell they rejiggered some parts of it during production to make it less of a part 2 in some ways, although it still very much is. And it's just, the American movie-going public at this point is very allergic to putting part 1 in the name of a movie, we have learned. Like, to the point that even the Demon Slayer movie this year, they didn't put part 1 in the title for the American release, even though it's there for the Japanese release. And probably smart, but it also means that, like, I definitely heard from people, like, in my life who went to see Infinity Castle and were like, well, I thought that was the rest of the series, because they didn't call it part 1. So you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't when you're doing multi-part movies. But hey, this has the best scene in The Final Reckoning, and it's one of the best scenes in Mission Impossible history, is the kind of what they teed up in Dead Reckoning is that Ethan has to get to this submarine and he has to get something out of it. And the scene where they do that is one of the coolest things you will ever see in a movie. Like, almost alone made it into my top 20. But then you also have the biplane stuff at the end, which is just fucking nuts. And I also think overall it worked for me as an ending to the series. It is, I think, the right kind of way to end this kind of thing, and I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll watch it at some point. But I think part of the other thing is I felt like I wanted to rewatch part 1. Maybe this is the other thing. I was like, well, because I didn't remember all that much about the actual plot of part 1, other than, remember, there's like an AI thing, and there's, I can't remember what the actress, the name I'm blanking on, but the girl who, all like the sleight of hand stuff, all that shit in the movie. Like, I kind of remembered that, but I did not remember anything else about the plot. And so I was like, I should probably watch part 1. And that's just like that extra level of kind of homework you got to do before you watch a movie. If it's not something I'm like super invested in, it's very easy to not find the time to do it,
The way I did it is I rewatched all 7 movies before the 8th one and wrote individual reviews of each one of them that went up on my site. So I was like in the other direction, but, I really love these movies. My number 16 was the new film by Kelly Reichardt, who rocks. It's her film The Mastermind, one of many films this year with Josh O'Connor starring in it, and he was great. And this is the most mid-century French-ass movie I have ever seen in English. It is a pastiche of like Robert Bresson and Louis Malle and Agnes Varda and Jean-Luc Godard, and it is like, sometimes I'm resistant to the French stuff, but it is also just part of my DNA as a film student / film professor now. And so this movie was going right after my heart, but it is also very good on its own terms. I think you could enjoy it even if you have none of those cinematic reference points, because it is just a really interesting little, technically a crime movie, not really a crime movie, about a very bored, out-of-work dad who decides he's going to do an art heist, and it goes totally wrong. And I don't want to spoil too much, but it's streaming on Mubi, and I would highly recommend people watch this movie. It's very good.
Cool.
You probably did not know that movie existed.
No, I did not. I've seen Mastermind. I just have not seen The Mastermind, the gritty reboot, I suppose, of Mastermind.
What's Mastermind?
Is that the movie I'm thinking of that's got Philip Seymour Hoffman, or I'm thinking of...
That's The Master.
The Master, sorry. That's what I'm thinking of.
Okay. Or you're thinking of Megamind, the movie with Will Ferrell. I thought maybe you'd had to watch that for with your students or something.
I've not seen that. I was thinking of The Master. I guess The Mastermind is not the gritty reboot of The Master. It's the sequel to The Master. It's The Mastermind.
Indeed. Number 15 is Superman, James Gunn's Superman. We talked about this on the show. We're pro James Gunn's Superman. Not a perfect movie, but man, if you like Superman and wanted Superman on film, we hadn't really gotten that in a real way since long before you and I were born, Sean. And so here we go. It's a proper Superman movie and a proper Mr. Terrific movie, because, man, Mr. Terrific rocked.
Mr. Terrific rocks. Nathan Fillion as Green Lantern rocks. The Hawk Girl rocks. Yeah, it is a very fun superhero movie.
Yes. My number 14, another movie we discussed on the podcast, Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, which, again, not a perfect movie, but, man, at its heights, this movie is just stunning. And you can go listen to our entire episode to talk about that. My number 13 was Rian Johnson's latest Benoit Blanc film, Wake Up Dead Man, which, have you seen this yet? Have you seen any of the Benoit Blanc movies?
No, I really need to watch these. I'm in a weird place with these movies where I end up watching. I'm sure everyone has this with certain things, where I just end up seeing clips of it on YouTube, and I've like watched shit tons of clips. Obviously not this one because it's new, but of the first two. And it's like every clip I see, I'm like, God, this looks like it's straight up my fucking alley. You know, I love these kind of mystery stories. I love that we have someone making movies that is this kind of mystery where it's, you know, you have the central kind of quirky detective character, but the movies are not about that character. The movies are about a mystery that person stumbles into each time, you know, in classic, you know, Sherlock Holmes, Columbo fashion. And I really need to watch them. I just end up in a weird mode where I just see all these clips on YouTube. It's like, God, these movies look fucking great.
They are fucking great. This one might be the best one. I would have to rewatch them all to like make that determination again. But Wake Up Dead Man is cool. Like the thing it does is it really, the first two movies are more mystery comedy. Like they're very sincere about their mysteries and there are real stakes, but they are also very funny movies in the way Rian Johnson movies are often very funny. Wake Up Dead Man is still funny, but it is more sober. It is more down to earth. It's a little more oblique while also I think being more interestingly pointed in what it is doing with like the modern day allegory. And it is just a great film about religion and faith. And it's the rare great film about religion and faith that I think would work equally well for someone who is a total atheist non-believer as well as someone who is like a devout believer, because it is about both sides of that perspective. And I know Rian Johnson like has both of those within him. He splits them off here where you've got Daniel Craig playing someone who is an atheist. You've got Josh O'Connor playing someone who is a Catholic priest, but also is dissatisfied with the way his local church is going. Really cool movie. And I think a very vital movie for the moment we live in.
Yeah. And then again, I will definitely get around to watching these when the next time I'm on some sort of like big mystery kick and I'm like rewatching Columbo or something. I'm sure I will end up rolling into these films.
Watch these. Watch Poker Face on Peacock with Natasha Lyonne, because that's also Rian Johnson, and that one is just the Columbo reboot, but with Natasha Lyonne as Columbo. Which, hey, that sounds great, and it is. All right, my number 12 is a movie we talked about at length this year, Sean, and that is Demon Slayer, Kimetsu no Yaiba, the movie, Infinity Castle, Part 1, Akaza Returns.
a movie that you need to double check what the entire title is every time you want to talk about it.
Look, you know, you guys can bitch and moan all you want about, like, it's too long and it should have just been episodes of a TV series and they're milking it, blah, blah. Shut the fuck up and go watch something else. This movie rocks. It's great. We've explained why it's great. I've written about it. We've podcasted about it. Also, the like box office records this movie has broken this year are fucking astonishing. It's like one of the biggest stories in world cinema of all time, the like amounts of money this movie has made, and only overshadowed this year because Ne Zha 2, the Chinese blockbuster, is the highest grossing film of the year. But Sean, did you know that among other box office records, this film now at over $800 million this year holds the record for the highest grossing 2D animated movie ever in its initial release? It's outgrossed what The Lion King did in 1994. Now, The Lion King through re-releases has gone up like past $1 billion, but if you're talking about the initial theatrical release, this broke the nominal value of the fucking Lion King, right? Wow, that's crazy.
That is pretty fucking crazy. I had not seen that one. This movie to me is just like, as a public school teacher that, you know, works with 14, 15-year-olds, they don't watch lots of movies, you know? But this is the one where I had more than one student, because obviously they know that I watch anime and I talked with this movie with a bunch of the kids. I had more than one student come up to me and ask me, how do you go see a movie in the movie theater so they could go see this film? That, you know, it's that they had literally never seen a movie in the movie theater before, but they wanted to see this movie so bad. Because keep in mind that, like, for these kids at this point, COVID happened when they were, you know, elementary school. And so, you know, for their lives, like, movie theaters have just not been a part of it. And so, like, that just tells you a lot about this franchise, and the kind of level of appeal and enthusiasm it has across such a wide spectrum of people. That is the kind of reaction it got. That kids are like going to go see this movie specifically when never having seen a movie theater before, and just going with them and a group of their friends. You know, they had never gone to see a movie with their parents before or anything like that.
Yeah. And again, this movie is not on my top 20 because it's done really well and the kids love it. It's on there because I think it's genuinely a spectacular movie. Obviously, it's amazingly well produced by Ufotable, but also, as we talked about, the way it has this kind of nested triptych structure of the three battles, with the last one turning into this very like internal, story about Akaza, and another case of, Kimetsu, I think, kind of putting all of its themes into one smaller story that then becomes a stand-in for everything else. It's incredible, and I think people dismiss the formal and narrative achievements of this series at their own peril, because I think it often makes them look uneducated. I'll just say that. Fuck it.
Yes. No. I mean, I agree. Yeah. There's a. We'll talk about when we get into some of our stuff section about the poisoned way in which people watch certain series and like the resistance to certain kinds of storytelling. I don't know, but yes.
All right.
Yeah.
And my final one in my second 10, this was the hardest cut for me from my main 10, and this is a movie that I think has been really underdiscussed this year, but it is Francis Lawrence's The Long Walk, which came out back in August. It did well, and people definitely liked it, but I don't think it got a ton of hype. And I do understand why. This is as big of a bummer of a movie as you will see this year. It is an adaptation of one of Stephen King's early novellas. It was one of his Richard Bachman books, actually. Just same thing Shawshank Redemption was, where he wrote under a pseudonym. And it is The Long Walk, the book, has always been cited as one of the precursors to something like Battle Royale or The Hunger Games, because it's about a competition in a future fascist America where one kid from every state is put together and they have to walk in a line across the country, and if one of them falls down, they get shot and killed, and it goes until the last one is still walking, and they have to walk and walk and walk. And so you can see how that has been influential in the modern sort of dystopian youth fiction movement, because there's a lot of stories that pull from that kind of thing. And so Francis Lawrence is the guy who's directed all but one of the Hunger Games movies. He didn't do the first one, he did the second on through the prequel movie, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which came out in 2023. And I think that, I don't think the Hunger Games movies are that good. I saw that prequel and I was kind of blown away because it is so much smarter, so much more mature, such a better piece of filmic direction. It has so much more, I think, resonance with our present moment. I think part of it is it was just written later by the author. And then I think for both her and then director Francis Lawrence, that is the Hunger Games existing in a moment where a lot of its ideas are no longer theoretical in modern day America. And I think The Long Walk obviously comes at a time when it's really, really present tense. I mean, Donald Trump late last year even suggested doing some kind of games with everyone from every state, just basically pitching The Long Walk, which I wouldn't be surprised if he did. And this movie, it is very much about living in a dystopia. It's about living under authoritarianism. I think what it specifically gets at, and is what makes it both such a bummer, but also I think such a cathartic, interesting film, is it is about the way living in a cruel authoritarian regime saps even good people of their compassion and humanity, or it can. It obviously doesn't have to, and it's something we have to hold on to, but it's really hard to hold on to when you live in a state of just complete cruelty. And I think the way this movie does that, particularly with the arc sort of traced by the co-lead of the film, played by David Johnson, who you might have seen in Alien Romulus. He's the android character in that film and was really good in that movie. He's spectacular here, playing opposite Philip Seymour Hoffman's son, Cooper Hoffman, who's a great young actor in his own right. It's a really remarkable movie, and I think Francis Lawrence has proven to be a more interesting commercial director than I would have assumed with his recent films. He's the kind of commercial director who's risen to the moment in a way a lot of commercial directors shrink away from it. And I think that's cool, and it's a movie that I was really shaken by, and I highly recommend.
Yeah, that sounds very good. This movie was not on my radar at all. I'd not heard of it.
Have you heard of the next movie, Sean, as we enter the top 10? Because my next movie is a little one called Avatar: Fire and Ash.
Yeah, I love he's got the little bald kid in it with this big bison he rides on. He's got a stick, right? He shoots air at people. I love Avatar. It's great. They just put out a fighting game. They just put out a fighting game. It looks pretty cool.
This is the real Avatar, Sean, the James Cameron Avatar. I say that now to my students sometimes, and it pisses them off so much because people who love Avatar: The Last Airbender are so fucking annoying about it. And I've never seen Avatar: The Last Airbender. I'm sure it's good. Shut the fuck up. It's like 20 years old. We're talking about the real Avatar. No, I'm kidding. But no, I did love it.
The best Avatar movie ever made, M. Night Shyamalan's Avatar: The Last Airbender. We can all agree.
That one was not called Avatar: The Last Airbender. That was called The Last Airbender because James Cameron had trademarked the title. And people still complain about that, like James Cameron did something wrong. He trademarked that title in the 90s, guys, because he'd been working on that movie for a really long time. He did not do it to piss off Nickelodeon, I promise. If James Cameron is aware of Avatar: The Last Airbender, I would be slightly surprised.
Yes. He's too busy diving deep into the Marianas Trench and or playing with his fucking computers. Like, the two things he loves to do.
Look, I was an Avatar skeptic going into 2022's The Way of Water. I think The Way of Water might be James Cameron's best movie. I think it is just fucking stunning. And I think 2025's Fire and Ash is not as good as that. I would put it more in the middle of the pack for James Cameron movies. I would still say this was an astonishing thing to me. Look, I have talked about this movie a lot online. I've written a review. It's got a giant section here in my top 10 piece. I've been writing about it on Blue Sky. I will just say this movie is on the top 10 because at a certain point I realized I couldn't stop thinking about all the wild, goofy shit that happens in this movie, particularly around the Stephen Lang character, Colonel Miles Quaritch, who at this point in the Avatar saga has been reborn in the body of a Na'vi, and he's off doing crazy shit, and in this movie he gets a girlfriend, and he has a midlife crisis. There's a scene in this movie where he walks into the military base. Edie Falco is playing like the stern military leader, and he just walks in full Na'vi war paint. He's painted his body red, and he's covered in ash, and he just stands there just kind of strutting, as if daring anyone to say anything, and I laughed so hard at that, I think I annoyed other people in the theater who didn't get why I found it so funny. I found it funny because it's fucking awesome, and, I think these movies are imperfect, but they are also some of the most singularly authored massive blockbusters of all time. And I am really fascinated with the way James Cameron makes these. I'm really fascinated with him as a filmmaker, even when in films I don't like as much. I just watched True Lies for the first time last night, and I'm not going to be able to stop thinking of that movie for a while. And it's not a good movie, but oh my God, that's a fascinating movie. But I think Fire and Ash is a good movie. It's a massive movie. This film is 2 minutes longer than Schindler's List, and I think that is fucking hilarious that James Cameron made the longest film of his career, and it is the third Avatar movie. And, more power to you, Big Jim. Go off. It is his $4 billion grossing movie in a row. Wow.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I don't know.
You're not into Avatar, and that's fine, Sean. No, that's fine.
Yes,
but
yeah. But when we did that podcast on the first Avatar, it really sapped any desire I had to see more of these movies.
And look, I do genuinely believe that there is a leap between Avatar 1 and 2. I think the second and third movies are drastically better films. I think they're so much more interesting. The way that they progress the timeline forward by 15 years. So Jake and Neytiri are now parents. They have kids. The kids are very central to the narrative. It's an actual generational story, particularly by the time you get to this third movie, in a way that the recent Star Wars films wanted to be, but never actually were because they couldn't let go of the past. And I think all of that, the way the first Avatar movie is so kind of bog standard in the narrative it's telling, and the second and third ones feel like they come out of dreams and therapy sessions. They are about James Cameron's anxieties as a parent, as a man, as an American. There's so many interesting things going on in these films. There's so much weird shit. You have full characters who are big space whales talking in subtitled papyrus through these movies, and they have full lyrical conversations with one another. These movies are absolutely wild. They're some of the most gorgeous things ever made. All the stuff in and around water in these movies blows me away. There's an action sequence at the beginning of Fire and Ash that is all in the sky that is one of the craziest things I've ever seen. I'm in the tank for at least these sequels. I think they're really fascinating movies. I hope Cameron makes more. I want to see where he fully takes this. I'm kind of obsessed with these movies at this point, and I'm surprised myself about that. But man, they're wild.
Well, luckily for you, Jonathan, they still make metric shit tons of money. So I know if James Cameron wants to make more of these, I'm sure he will be able to make more of these if he wants.
The last time a James Cameron movie grossed less than $1 billion, you and I were 2 years old, and that was True Lies in 1994. it's just a totally singular career that I find very fascinating. I've been going through his filmography recently to fill in the two gaps I had were The Abyss and True Lies. The Abyss, amazing movie. True Lies, amazing movie, but for really different reasons. Not qualitatively amazing necessarily, but amazing all the same. And just fascinating filmography. So that's where my mind was at. That's Avatar.
Great. I can't wait until you watch The Legend of Korra, I think is the next one.
Haven't they made a third one since then? I think they've made a third one.
I think they're making a movie now. I don't know. I
There's
watched
the live action Netflix series.
Yeah. I've only watched the first 2 seasons of the original Avatar show. I never even finished that one. I mean, I fucking watched it live, motherfuckers. I didn't get no DVDs. I didn't watch that shit streaming. I sat my ass down on a couch at like 4 p.m. or whenever it aired and fucking turned Nickelodeon on. And that's the only way you can watch it, and I'll never watch it if I can't watch it that way again.
Sean, as a James Cameron Avatar skeptic, where are you at on these movies have no cultural penetration debate that is now raging online again?
I think there is more than one way for something to have cultural influence, and it's like there are people for whom what to nerd culture, cultural influence is how many lines can I quote from the movie is like that's like the cachet they have. Can I say, no, I am your father, or Luke, I am your father, and have people understand what you said? It's, can I say, I can't carry you, but I can carry it for you, or whatever. You know, it's like, it's you shall not pass. Can I say that and have a random passerby know what I'm saying? That's what nerd people think counts as like cultural relevance. And that is a form of cultural relevance. That's not the form of cultural relevance that Avatar has, because nobody gives a shit about what the people are saying. It's the world, it's the aesthetic, it's like, that is the thing. These are like, especially now with the sequels, these are the only big like action spectacle blockbuster movies that are new original stories that Hollywood is making. Like, it is not a surprise to me that these sequels make this amount of money. Because it's like, they're the only movies making an argument for you to go see them in a fucking movie theater, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's like, and so obviously they have cultural relevance. Obviously they have cultural like influence and impact. It's just not in the way that you usually think of it with the movies you grew up with. But yeah, it feels like it's like groups of people that are talking past each other because they're using the term cultural impact and to mean something very specific rather than the very broad thing that it actually is referring to.
Well, and what they specifically mean also is like on my weird corner of the internet that very few people are on. Like, because the internet, let's all say it again, people, is not real life. Go touch grass. Or go see Avatar, Fire and Ash in theaters now. No, I do want to, like, that is one thing that I think you hit on there, Sean, even in your, not being a fan of these. They are the only 21st century, like, new movie mythology. No one else is making new stuff for people to get invested in. And like, I do think the Avatar movies are the closest, like, current generations have to that moment in the 70s and 80s when you had, like, Star Wars coming up and someone like George Lucas imagining a new world for people. You just, in movies, in games you still get this, in movies you don't. And I wish we did. And James Cameron is the only one getting to do it on this scale.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a big part of the success of these films, and always has been. I mean, it's been the pitch from the beginning, is the like immersive 3D, the like these like the most technically complicated advanced movies ever made, right? Like, that's the whole pitch. Like, it's the pitch of the plot is like, insert yourself into this other fantasy world, maybe try to ignore the fact that you're inserting yourself into a native coded body and all that shit. Like, try to, not think about that too much. But it's like, but what if you could just be like a big naked blue cat guy living on a big cool planet with like flowers and shit, rather than living in the shit world that we live in. That's the pitch these movies have always had, all the way back to the original.
All right, speaking of someone else who I think is getting close to the point where he could maybe have a James Cameron-esque career if he wanted to, let's talk about Ryan Coogler's Sinners, which is my number 9 movie of the year. Ryan Coogler had not made a non-Black Panther movie in a long time, because he made Black Panther in 2018, obviously Black Panther 2 was hit by multiple delays for the death of Chadwick Boseman and COVID and stuff. And now he is finally back with his first original movie since Fruitvale Station, and that is Sinners. Sinners, I think, is obviously like one of the definitive movies of 2025. This is one that made all kinds of cultural impacts, including being a like genuine word-of-mouth hit. It's the rare movie that was so good and people liked it so much that it made more money in its second weekend than it did in its first as a wide release. Virtually unheard of. In the modern, that used to happen maybe more in like the 80s and 90s, but not much anymore, and for good reason. Sinners is big, it is wide-ranging, it is ambitious. I think it's a little messy, but in ways that I think are productive and interesting and true to the themes the movie is dealing with. It is a film about and made through music. It has amazing performances, including our second twin performance of the episode after Robert Pattinson, with Michael B. Jordan playing twin brothers and doing an amazing job at it. It is a technical showpiece with, amazing IMAX and Ultra Panavision photography, and just, a great movie that I'm actually adding to my syllabus this year for Intro to Film Studies, because I realized I have a week on that syllabus about music in film. And someone came up to me after the last time I taught it and said, "You should teach Sinners for this. That movie's perfect for this." And I went, "You are right. You are right, child." Not child, 18-year-old, whatever, kid to me. You are right. And I think, for some reason, I like, for me, it was just like, that movie's too new to put on a syllabus. And I was like, no, it's not. No, it's not. This is the right movie for that. So I'm going to be showing this to my students soon. Great film.
Yeah, this is one. There are 4 movies on your list, Jonathan, that I have not yet seen that are the ones that I really, really want to watch, and this is the first of those that we've gotten to.
Yeah, worth a blind buy of the 4K disc, Sean, because it is one of those like demo material 4K discs, because it's all from IMAX and Ultra Panavision, so all 70 millimeter photography, and it looks just amazing on a big OLED display, and a real coup of production design and everything. I mean, this is like, Coogler worked with all the people who have won Oscars for him and others before, like Hannah Beachler on production design, Ruth Carter on costumes, Ludwig Göransson on score, and I would not be surprised if all those people win Oscars again for this one, because this movie is just like a crafts showcase in that way, in addition to being a great story and everything else.
Yeah, like, I feel like what I always end up doing is around Thanksgiving break of a year, I always like go and find what are some like 4K Blu-rays that I want to get that are on sale, that are from like movies from the last year or the last couple of years. And this is definitely one of those that is like, I'm keeping it in the back of my head for when that time comes around again.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, my number 8 is also a horror movie, but a very different one. 28 Years Later by Danny Boyle. This is the sequel to 28 Days Later. There is the 28 Weeks Later, which was not made by Danny Boyle or Alex Garland, and I think is very, very bad. But 28 Days Later is a masterpiece, and I think 28 Years Later is even better. We're recording this on January 11th. We're just a couple of days away from 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, because this has been sort of planned as a trilogy, with the second one directed by Nia DaCosta, and they were shot back to back. And I'm very excited to see where they go with more of this story, but I also think this first film is completely self-contained in a really beautiful way. It's the kind of sci-fi / horror movie that only Alex Garland and or Danny Boyle would make, where it starts with like a certain kind of genre premise, but is really about such deeper, weirder, harder, thornier ideas. In particular, this movie is about losing a parent, and how that is tied into the way we come into our identity as people and adults. And it does that through some amazing zombie action, but also some crazy visual metaphors, with the last third of this movie kind of dominated by Ralph Fiennes in a performance where he is slathered in iodine, so he looks orange, and he's holding bleached skulls, and it's somehow one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. The whole movie was shot in the same, actually, aspect ratio as Sinners, 276:1, but this one was done on an iPhone 15, so it's digital photography and like consumer digital, which is also how 28 Days Later was done back in the day. And it looks fucking gorgeous. Anthony Dodd Mantle, who shot this, is one of the original like auteurs of digital filmmaking. He shot like some of the original Dogma 95 movies, like The Celebration. And I think this is like one of the most stunning looking films of the year. It's got a great score. The performances are amazing. Man, I really am excited to watch this movie again. And I probably should soon before I go see The Bone Temple, because this movie is amazing.
Yes, this is the second of the four movies that I really desperately want to watch. 28 Days Later is one of my favorite horror movies ever.
Yeah.
That movie is just absolutely incredible. So I will definitely get around to this one.
And if I hope the next one does well, because then if it does, we should get a third movie in this little trilogy where Danny Boyle would come back around and direct it. I think Alex Garland has already written it, but I hope it gets made. All right, my number 7 is another anime film for us, Sean. It is Chainsaw Man, the movie Reze Arc, directed by Yoshihara Tatsuya. Have you seen this yet, Sean? I'm curious.
No, this is the third. This is the third of those movies. Yeah, I just I kind of wanted to see it in the theater, never got around to it. I think if we never ended up planning on doing a podcast on it. If we had done that, I definitely would have seen it. But yes.
Well, and here's part of
it was very beloved.
Yeah, and Sean, part of why we didn't do a podcast on it is I think neither of us was really blown away by the anime Chainsaw Man. It's a good anime, no doubt. It's good, it's fun, it's a nice 12 episode watch, but something about it didn't click for me. I think part of that is that it's so brief at 12 episodes. It doesn't get to a point in the story where you feel like you really know what Chainsaw Man is yet. But the Reze Arc movie it took me aback. I was expecting it to be good. Mappa does good work. And again, that first season was good, but I loved this movie. And I loved it so much that it made me go back and read the manga. And I've read up through where the Reze Arc stuff happens in the manga. And one thing I realized is that I do think the first season of the anime has a pretty substantial disconnect in form between what it's doing and how that manga is drawn and paneled and paced. The manga is just substantially sadder and weirder than I think the show really captured. But the film, which has a new director, Yoshihara Tatsuya, who was credited as the action director on season 1, and season 1 had great action, is now the overall director on this. And he really rethinks how this looks and works and everything. And so it has a much more sensual style. The first half of this movie is basically a KyoAni film. It is so close to the way Ishihara Tatsuya or Yamada Naoko storyboard movies that it's very clearly, I think, a conscious influence. And of course it has why am I forgetting his name? Ushio Kensuke doing the music, and of course he's Yamada Naoko's house composer. And this is a very silent voice-esque score that he gives to this movie, or at least its first half. And I think it captures a lot more of what is special about the manga. It rethinks some visual things. Chainsaw Man, when Denji would turn into that form, was always done as CGI in the show. They've redone it to be, there's clearly some digital assistance going on, but his head is hand-drawn now, and so you get a lot more of that kind of sketchy, messy action that is in the manga. But then the second half of this film, when it goes off the rails and becomes a giant action movie, is also just stunning, and it's I think you can feel also a conscious effort to make this different than our other big shonen action movies or series of the time. It doesn't look like Jujutsu Kaisen. It doesn't look like Demon Slayer. It doesn't look like any of that stuff. It's uniquely Chainsaw Man. And I think you have the two halves of this movie, one that is this just about adolescent first love, and one that is about, I think, a giant action shonen expression of what roils inside the heart when you are an adolescent. And it makes for a really stunning movie that I think is the best of these recent anime films other than Kimetsu no Yaiba Mugen Train. It's on that level and has been a big sensation for a reason. It actually opened a little softer in the Japanese box office than you would have expected, but it's stuck around, and it's actually, I think it's close to outgrossing Jujutsu Kaisen 0, which was a huge hit and Mappa's biggest hit to date. And I think just word of mouth for this film has understandably been really strong, and it turned me into a fan of something I didn't think I was a fan of, and now I adore that manga. I'm very excited to see what they do next, be it another TV season or a film or whatever. But this is a special property, and this film does it beautifully. It's just flat out, take my anime obsessions and everything else out of it. This is one of the best directed movies I watched this year. Flat out.
Yeah, and that's just kind of what I've heard from a lot of people where, I think season 1 had a kind of mixed reception. A lot of places, I know for sure in Japan, there was a very split feeling on it, which is, I'm sure that is why it had a slightly softer reception initially. But then word of mouth for this movie has been so good that it just I've just heard the things you've said from so many people about this movie, that it captures what the manga is doing better. I think it also just, it seems we both had the exact same issue with the first season of the show, which is like it is a one core season of anime for a story that is not designed to be fit into a one core shape. They don't do anything to really make it feel like it fits well into a one core shape. And so you just kind of leave that season impressed by a lot of things they do, because there's a lot of things that are very impressive about it, but ultimately dissatisfied by the story that they told within that space of time. And it just seems like once you have that kind of teaser done with the season 1 stuff, that the Reze arc sounds like it is getting into the meat of that story and all that kind of stuff.
And it's a case a lot like Mugen Train, where there just happened to be a little arc in the middle of this manga that is the shape of a movie. And if they do adjust some things, obviously, the same way Mugen Train did, but it just has the shape of a Kisho Tenketsu, like 4-act, big Japanese movie, and they nail it, and it's really cool to see. Like, it's better than it would be in a TV version, because it gets to be a focused film. My number 6 is also an anime movie that you have seen, I have seen, we have done a podcast on. That is Yamada Naoko's The Colors Within. Sean, 2025 was so fucking long that this movie came out, and we podcasted on it January 2025. I taught it. I've already taught it once in my intro to film class last year, and I've shown it. I showed it to a friend over the summer. So I've seen this movie more than anything else on this list. And now I'm teaching. I'm teaching it again this semester. It's what more can you say about it? It's a beautiful movie. It is not Yamada Naoko's most like attention grabbing like tour de force. That is probably still a silent voice. But I think it concentrates and distills what makes her special, maybe more so than any other single thing you could go watch. And I love it for that. And it is also, again, just one of the best, most muscular pieces of direction you will see this year. And with the reaction among my students when I showed it was kind of interesting. Not to be too gender essentialist, but like this is the reaction I saw. The girls in the class loved this movie. I think they were really taken aback by it. I think they were probably, especially if they weren't anime people, thinking this is anime, this is going to be a boys-only affair, because that is very much how anime is often pitched in the US through the kind of shonen-dominant stuff. And I think a lot of them were surprised and said to me during discussions, like, man, I like saw parts of myself in this movie I hadn't seen in a movie before. And then I did notice a lot of like your 18-year-old boys in the class being very bored by it. And, they just do not have the capacity for empathy yet to get what a great movie this is.
They just, that prefrontal cortex has just got to get a little bit beefier before they're ready for the colors with it. Yeah. This is without any real competition, because I did not see all that many movies that were new this year. This is the best movie I saw this year. And it is the highest movie I've seen this year that is on your list. So we are in agreement.
Yeah.
That's the movie, essentially. This movie's just fucking incredible. We did a whole big podcast on it, but I do like occasionally just have like moments and images from this movie that just kind of pop into my head every once in a while. I still I think about that fucking shot where she has the Newton's cradle and pulls it back, and it's like the reflections and how they're animated on it. It's just like, oh my God, like it's such a gorgeous movie in terms of its production and the direction and the mood that it creates. And this very simple but very touching and powerful coming of age story for these three weirdos, Yeah. It's great.
Great movie. My number 5 is No Other Choice by Park Chan-wook. Is this one of the movies you've been planning to see, Sean? Because if not, you fucking need to.
No. There's another one a little bit higher up on this list that is my number 4. I did not know that this movie existed before I saw it on your list, so that is why.
Well, add it to your list, Sean, because I know you like Park Chan-wook. You've seen Old Boy. And No Other Choice is one of his best films.
Do they eat a live octopus in this movie?
They do other weird stuff. They don't do that. Yeah. They do other weird stuff.
They don't eat a lot live octopus. I don't know if I need to see it.
You need to see this. This is an amazing satire. It has been a huge hit in Korea, by the way, like a real breakout hit over there. And so it got a pretty good release here as well. And it's currently in theaters if people want to go find it. It's fantastic. It is a satire about it's a capitalism satire, but it is done the way only Park Chan-wook would do it, which is that it is like genuinely transgressive. So it is based on a Donald Westlake novel called The Axe, which has previously been adapted to film by Costa Gravas, who this film is dedicated to. Costa Gravas being one of the great filmmakers in film history, and this is one of his last movies. But this is a very like Park Chan-wook spin on the story, where it is about a man. who works for a big firm that makes paper, and there's a round of automation and layoffs, and he is laid off, and so he's trying to find a new job. And after a year of searching for a job, he becomes so desperate because his family is going to lose, their house, and they're going to go from being like upper middle class to lower middle class, right? It's that kind of like class fall. And so he becomes desperate, and he hatches a plan to kill everybody else applying for a position that he wants. And so it is kind of a serial killer movie, but one of the weirdest serial killer movies you will ever see. And just giving that like description of what this movie is doing does not do it justice, because it is strange, and it is delirious in how creative it is. It is one of, like, on the level of craft, particularly cinematography and editing, one of the best and most impressive films of this last year that, like, really kind of blew my mind moment to moment. There's a scene that uses really loud sound design and an overwhelming needle drop over this sort of desperate fight scene that is pure Park Chan-wook, but also one of the most like jaw-dropping things I've seen this year. And I think the way it tells with both humor and then ultimately like an incredible sobriety in its final moments, this story spinning out of sort of the Marxist critique that capitalism feeds on the production of intra-class competition. It makes people at the same rung fight each other rather than fighting the actual enemy, which is the people a rung above. Or not a rung above, but at the top of the rung, we should say. The way it like takes that and spins it out and makes it increasingly complicated and fraught and visceral is really impressive. And it is also just endlessly entertaining. Like, it's also one of the funniest movies of the year. Completely singular. No one else would make a movie like this, and one of the best films I saw last year. If you have any interest at all in what I just said, make time to go see No Other Choice. You will love it. I kind of guarantee it.
I mean, it just kind of sounds like a documentary. I mean, this is the only way you can get a job in this fucking market,
That's how you got your job, right, Sean?
Shh, we don't tell people that, but, don't, if you see some mysterious piles of dirt somewhere in northern Texas, maybe don't undig them.
My number 4 is another movie that is absolutely bonkers. It is Marty Supreme by Josh Safdie, working solo this time. He and his brother Benny have made movies together before, including the great 2019 film Uncut Gems with Adam Sandler, that is one of the great like modern heart attack movies, in that it is so stressful it will make you like physically uncomfortable. And Marty Supreme might be even more uncomfortable. It is a film nominally about table tennis because Timothée Chalamet plays a character inspired by, though not based on, a real American table tennis champ. But really, this movie, it has armed robbery in it. It's got car crashes, a gas station explodes, there's a subplot about a runaway dog, it's surprisingly graphically violent at times for a table tennis movie, it has very charged moments of sexuality, including an opening credits sequence that follows a character's sperm impregnating another character's egg, while the Alphaville song Forever Young plays, and the movie just gets more nuts from there. Its body count, in terms of how many people die violently in this movie, is the same as John Carpenter's original Halloween, and again, I have to stress, this is a movie about Timothée Chalamet playing ping pong. This movie is absolutely insane. It feels like one of the great, like, lost masterpieces of the 70s or 80s that in a different era Al Pacino would have been the character here. And I think it is the movie that confirms that Timothée Chalamet is not just someone we're all kind of jealous of for his success at such a young age, but he's actually a great actor who we just have to give it to. And I will begrudgingly say that. He's not just a little shit. He's an actual great actor. I say this, he's 3 years younger than me. This is not like crazy. He is of our generation, technically. But anyway, Marty Supreme is wonderful. And I think it is also a great movie about America. I kind of compared it to Philip Kaufman's The Right Stuff, but as like the shadow of that movie, where The Right Stuff is about genuinely great people doing genuinely great things in a way that is like kind of an ideal version of America, but also is a little like scary and off-putting in how nuts those guys are in that movie, and it's a true story. Marty Supreme is about someone who isn't actually as great as he thinks he is, and what he wants to achieve is not really of all that much substance, but I think it says a lot about who we are as a people through its 2.5 hours. And I've seen other really great readings of this movie from other critics, including some, like this is a very Jewish movie. Marty is playing, Timothée Chalamet's Marty is a Jewish character. There's a lot of like interesting like cultural stuff going on here. It's a movie set in the 70s, so it's also about kind of your first generation of American Jews growing up in the shadow of the Holocaust having happened in their parents' generation. And I think the way this movie deals with that is really, really interesting and is something I maybe, as a Gentile, did not see in this movie the first time I saw it, but I've read some really great criticism on it. And it's a movie I can't wait to see again. It's so just ludicrously entertaining. So, so good.
Sounds pretty fucking good. I want to see a table tennis person who racks up a fucking body count.
You should watch this movie. Sean, I can't recommend it enough. Great stuff. All right, my number 3 is a movie I recommend, but with the caveat that it will bum you the fuck out and weird you out, because this is really an avant-garde film I am recommending at this point, and that is Die My Love by Lynn Ramsey. This film has had fairly split reaction, in part, I think, because it is a movie that stars major movie stars Jennifer Lawrence and Robert Pattinson. And all the marketing for this movie makes me laugh so hard. I've been getting ads for this on Instagram, and what they do for all the Instagram ads is they take out the 3 frames of the movie that are Robert Pattinson and Jennifer Lawrence as a happy couple kissing at their wedding, which is a tiny little sequence of this movie, and they put romantic music over it, go see the new romantic film with Robert Pattinson and Jennifer Lawrence. That's not what this movie is, guys. This is like a feature-length Stan Brakhage movie. It's a feature-length avant-garde movie about people living with horrific emotions in a little house in the woods, and it is about expressing all of that through the cinematic language of film. And it's technically about postpartum depression, because the character played by Jennifer Lawrence has just had a baby, and she is going through some kind of mental health crisis after the baby is born. But to say it is about that, I think sells it short. I think this is, again, one of the just absolute best directed things I saw this year. I think as a piece of film craft, this movie is ahead of the pack in a lot of ways, in the way it uses its film language, its cinematography by the great Seamus Garvey, and then, of course, 2 great performances by Lawrence and Pattinson to make you feel like you are in the midst of these emotions, not just seeing them from the outside looking in. And that is a really special thing that film can do, that I think is challenging for film to do, but is very worthwhile. And I think in a time where, women's bodies have always been sites of contestation in our politics, but boy howdy, right now, it's not just that we live in a time where Roe v. Wade was overturned and women literally do not have bodily autonomy in our country anymore, but there are so many other issues of misogyny and sexist hate embedded into our laws and our systems and our governance. I think there's an idea in this movie, and there's never reaches a point of catharsis. It never reaches a point of hope, and I think it is very honest in what it is doing, and I think it's a really important film. And I understand why a lot of people recoiled at this movie, because it is not the movie you would expect from any piece of marketing, or just from the general idea of Jennifer Lawrence and Robert Pattinson are in a movie together, and their new parents. It's not that movie, but I think it's a really stunning thing in its own right.
It is funny to imagine the alternate reality where rom-coms still existed, and that was a movie that was ever made. And there's absolutely is an alternate reality where Robert Pattinson is what Matthew McConaughey used to be. It's I had never thought about it before, but you describing those ads, I'm oh my God, that's it's if Robert Pattinson was born 20 years earlier, that is the actor he would have ended up as, and then would have probably McConaughey ended up with this weird resurgence where he got into weirder shit at a much older age than his career now has been him, rolling off of Twilight and being I want to be a weird motherfucker. Let's go.
Yeah. He's a weird motherfucker in Twilight. Robert Pattinson has never been less than 100% Robert Pattinson. And no, he and Jennifer Lawrence are very funny people. They're very charismatic actors. They could do a rom-com that would probably kill. And that's part of what is so fascinating about this movie is the way it uses movie stars is harrowing and unexpected. And Lawrence is just, she is not someone who is capable of faking it when she's not interested in a movie, as evidenced by her X-Men and Hunger Games appearances. But when she is engaged, she's really singular. And I think you see that here. She acts with her full body in a way very few people do. You realize watching what she does with the entire space of her physical frame, how many actors don't do that or don't get the chance to do that. And she's just tremendous here.
Yeah, I had not thought about her a deservedly horrible performance in X-Men Apocalypse in a while. I just had like such an intense flashback to the beginning of that movie. Oh my god.
Or you didn't even. Do you ever see Dark Phoenix?
No.
Because that one's even worse. Even I think that's where the line about like we should call it the X-Women comes from, and you can just. Her performance in Dark Phoenix is the most contempt an actor has had for the movie they're in that I have ever seen in my life. And God bless her for it, because that movie deserves contempt. It is contemptible.
It's like she probably was one movie away from just strapping her fucking like contract onto the chest of her costume. It's just having that. It's like, I gotta have people know I'm contractually obligated to be in these fucking movies, and just have like the relevant parts highlighted in yellow highlighter.
All right, my number 2 movie of the year is Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another, which I don't even know how much I need to talk about. You know, I wrote about it. I wrote about it again for this piece. And of course, you have heard about it. It is, as I said here, I think it is kind of undeniably the definitive film of 2025 in the way not every year has a film like this, but some years. Like I would say like Bong Joon-ho's Parasite in 2019 was like this, where it's just kind of universally everyone can agree that if it's not the best, it's one of the best. And you can also agree that it is like very of the moment it came out in. You know, I think Paul Thomas Anderson is the greatest American filmmaker to emerge in my lifetime, you know, since 1992. And I think this is, you know, as good a film as he's ever made. It is an incredible movie about resistance, political resistance, but in ways that I think are surprising, that aren't didactic, that are still very funny and insightful and human, and I think touch on a lot of other issues. I think it is about the way resistance is not something that can create immediate gratification. What am I trying to say? Is that the word?
Satisfaction?
Satisfaction. Maybe that's what I'm... Anyway, sorry, my words got tangled there for a second.
Or it could be gratifying.
Gratifying, yeah. Gratification is not a word. Anyway, it's not immediately gratifying. It is a generational project. And within that, you know, you have, I think, Leonardo DiCaprio's best performance in many, many years. Because I think Leo, in his middle age, is someone he's an actor who is a bundle of tics. And I think those tics can be used really well, or they can be used in a way that I find kind of distracting and overburdened. For instance, I think in Killers of the Flower Moon, the Scorsese movie, I think his tics overburden that film and his part in it. I think here they're perfect because he's playing like an ex-revolutionary stoner who is trying to rescue his daughter and is not really equipped to do it. And I think it makes for a pretty perfect use of Leonardo DiCaprio. You have Chase Infinity, newcomer, who plays his daughter and is just a stunning film debut. You have Sean Penn playing the grossest movie villain in many, many years, who I think, not coincidentally, is based fairly clearly on Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in the way he holds himself and moves, who is maybe the most disgusting person in our politics right now. And then you have Benicio del Toro in his second appearance on my list with the scene-stealing performance of 2025 as Sensei Bob. And just this movie rocks. It was shot. It's one of several recent movies that have revived the VistaVision photography format. And I'm a big fan of VistaVision. It was not used that long in movie history. The like definitive VistaVision movie is The Searchers by John Ford. But it's a really beautiful kind of large format 35 millimeter where you run the film horizontal through the camera rather than vertical. And One Battle After Another uses it, and it had an IMAX release, and it's just one of the most visually stunning films you'll ever see. It is very funny. It has some amazing action. There's a car chase in this movie that is unlike any other. It's conceptually very different than any car chase you've ever seen, but it is so thrilling. I'm really excited for this movie to come out on 4K Blu-ray so I can watch it again, because I have not wanted to revisit it on streaming where I will just be disappointed by the low bit rate. I'm just give me my 4K disc so I can really enjoy this movie. And it rocks.
Yes, this is the number one movie that came out last year that I want to watch. And yeah, this is the one that because I haven't seen all of Paul Thomas Anderson's movies, but I've seen most of them. Although obviously not recently enough to have accurately remembered the title of the master. Yeah, this movie just seems fucking awesome. It's just a casualty of I almost never go to the movie theater these days unless it's for a podcast. But I'm keeping that. I'm waiting for that 4K Blu-ray, as you say. It's just I'm keeping that right in the back of my head. I'm sure that will be one of my birthday presents to myself next year for next Thanksgiving break.
It comes out next week for people wondering when it's coming out on 4K. It is currently streaming on HBO Max if you want to see it there. But it is coming soon to home video, which is great. And probably also getting a theatrical re-release in the near future because it's going to be a big Oscar contender. So I'm sure it's going to have a lot of play in theaters again. And it is worth seeing in a theater if you have a chance to do it. Obviously, it was my number 2 movie of the year, and it was my number 1 movie of the year, because my number 1 was a weird choice. And look, sometimes I have done top 10 lists where I make gimmick choices. Sometimes it's to piss off Sean. Sometimes it's because it amuses me. This was not a gimmick choice to me. This was like an actual, like, profoundly, like, deeply felt thing that I wanted to see if I could articulate to myself well enough that I could put it on the list. And so I did wind up writing a big piece on this film that is embedded within the top 10 piece. I wrote about 2-3 pages. And so what I named my number 1 movie of the year is a video essay by Lindsay Ellis called The Unforgivable Sin of Miss Rachel. She put this out in August of 2025 on YouTube and on Nebula. Lindsay Ellis does most of her work on Nebula now since a really, really, really stupid cancellation incident on Twitter a couple years ago. But, you know, if you follow the world of video essays, Lindsay Ellis is kind of the OG. She is one of the people who really kicked off the modern form of the trend. And one of the reasons I feel perfectly comfortable, honestly, putting this on my top 10 is that the video essay is a 20th century form of filmmaking. A lot of the greatest directors did film essays. They weren't called video essays back then because they were often done on film and not video didn't exist yet. But like, you know, Jean-Luc Godard, most of his career after the 60s and 70s is film essays, like Histoire du Cinéma, Goodbye to Language. Chris Marker, almost everything he ever directed would be called an essay film, like Sans Soleil is probably his most famous movie, or A Grin Without a Cat. And then Orson Welles also contributed heavily to this because F for Fake, I would generally agree, I think, with the camp that would say that movie is better understood as a film essay than a documentary. It is both, and all film essays are documentaries to some degree, but I think that is what that is. And, you know, I listed those 5 movies just now. All 5 of those got double-digit numbers of votes on the last Sight and Sound poll for the greatest movies of all time. So there's no lack of consensus that those are films. And I think we have a weird hang up in calling work done for or on YouTube films. And I think even the people who do it might have this hang up. Like Lindsay Ellis does not call her movies films. She does not call herself a director. She uses the term video. And I totally understand that. But this is one of the best pieces of filmmaking I saw last year, because filmmaking is a lot of different things. Filmmaking can be great cinematography, and it can be a great story, and it can be great performances, but it can also be assembling footage, visual data, writing, rhetoric in such a way to make a powerful argument that you could only make through through a medium of moving image media. And I think that is what this is. If you haven't seen this video essay, and it's about 2.5 hours long, it's very much feature length, as many of these are now. This is an essay that starts on the issue of the children's entertainer Miss Rachel, who is sort of a modern day Mr. Rogers. Although for the internet age, not the like public television age. And it starts on the issue of Miss Rachel has been an advocate for children in Palestine, in Gaza, during the Israeli genocide of the region. And she has been relentlessly hounded by critics as an anti-Semite for this, despite her advocacy just being, get these kids out of there into safety. And she starts on that issue, and I think correctly identifies through a sort of survey of the history of children's edutainment in this country from Sesame Street to today, this attack, this multi-pronged political attack on the concepts of kindness and empathy in our country. And she then expands that argument out to be about the history of genocide, the history of recent politics, sort of a theological history. She goes through all these big histories, brings them up to the present day historical reality, and then she brings it all back around in the end to the Miss Rachel issue again. And I just think as a piece of film assembly, of tying visual data and multiple mediums, because she talks about movies and she talks about books and plays and musicals, and of course she has Andrew Lloyd Webber jokes in here because she always does. The way that is all tied together makes for a piece of media that did more for me personally to contextualize the terrible fucking year we lived in than anything else I watched last year. And when I watched this in August, when she first released it, I just remember thinking to myself, this is the best movie I've watched this year. And I thought that before I interrogated it and went, is this a movie? Can I call it a movie? Can I put it on a list like this? And I thought about all that, and to me, the answer was undeniably yes. But the other thing was that when I was looking at my top 10, and I considered versions of it with this movie on and with it off, with this essay on and with it off, and I just didn't feel comfortable naming anything else the number one kind of anything of this year, because this year, I think, broke the bounds of what we can actually articulate with fiction in a way that, like, I frequently felt uncomfortable devoting my life to talking about movies because it felt small. And I felt uncomfortable doing, academia as a job because it felt small in the face of the evil we lived amongst. And there was something that felt just a lot more honest and meaningful about putting this at number one and hopefully getting people to watch it in whatever small neck of the woods of influence I have than it would putting any of these other great movies I talked about at that spot. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that, Sean, because this is like the weirdest choice I've ever made for a list like this, but I feel very strongly about it.
Yeah, unfortunately, I haven't watched this one yet, mostly because when Lindsay Ellis went to Nebula because of one of the stupidest fucking things I've ever seen happen on the internet. One of the most, like, palpable examples of people who are supposedly leftists consuming their own. It's just, that's all. That's a whole own podcast talking about that fucking shit. But unfortunately, it's like I don't like use Nebula, so I kind of like lost track of the stuff that she was doing. And so I just have not gotten around to watching this. But I'm totally with you that I think something like this is totally fair game on this kind of list, especially as someone who works with young people, and especially young people who are not, in the middle class and certainly not in the upper class. I related earlier, I had multiple kids this year ask me, how do you go see a movie in the movie theater? Like, how does that work? And I do think there's just a palpable sensation. I think that there's like a different version of this that's happening in video games as well, which is just like a lot of kind of traditional, what we feel are traditional forms of media that we have grown up with, but like movies and video games, both of which are like infantile in the history of human art. They're very, very small blips in the history of art that humans have made compared to things like paintings and literature. But literature, including the oral spoken literature, is how it format that. And so I think, like, when you're looking at the relationship of what we consider to be quote unquote films and its proximity and sort of like reliance definitionally on the theater and having a theatrical experience, and it is a thing that is like displayed publicly in that way, and or is something that you purchase as a, direct to DVD, direct to video, or something you stream on platforms that make their foundation things that were related to those two pre-existing business models. Either something like HBO Max, which has its whole like business legacy in that world, or it's Netflix, whose legacy is sending you fucking DVDs of movies, right? Like YouTube is this other platform that does not have any inherent DNA in the traditional format in which we consider quote unquote films, moving images as a means of communicating with an audience, which is all that films are. And so I absolutely think it's completely fair to argue that a video that is premiered and exists entirely on a platform like YouTube or Nebula or any other dedicated online streaming video platform that is not meant to be a delivery mechanism of traditional films or traditional television, that should count on a list like this. Because if you aren't starting to consider those things on lists like this, your list might start looking very barren. Because who knows how long, if it has, because I'm sure that there are still some old school people who are like, if it did not have a theatrical release, it does not belong on this fucking list. This is only things that were
I work with some of those people. They are my colleagues. Yeah.
And those people are going to start finding a very, very small box that they are given to play in if you're not starting to look out of that format. And at this point, like the genre of the YouTube video essay is so well developed. It has like a whole big rich culture and history to it in and of itself. And they are frequently and almost sometimes frustratingly feature length. I'm sure that this one justifies it. There are definitely a lot that do not justify their insane length. Because sometimes these are people that are not working with and have never worked with an editor and don't know what that is. Again, I'm not saying that's for Lindsay Ellis, but for other.
We make 4-hour podcasts. We're not throwing stones. We get it. It's okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
But absolutely, and when I think about this, I think about last year. Folding Ideas, Dan Olson of Folding Ideas released the video essay, I'm Not James Rolfe, I think is what it's called.
One of the best films of that year, easily, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I would say, again, as someone who does not watch a lot of movies, like I would say that either is or was close to the best movie of last year. And especially as someone who creates content online, and in the like analysis of what it is because everybody our age and younger creates content online. Like, not literally everybody, but so many do. Like, the vast majority of the kids that I teach have TikTok accounts or Instagram accounts or YouTube accounts, Twitch accounts. They stream themselves playing video games, right? Being a streamer or a content creator online is one of the most desirable professions for young people these days. And that video, I'm Not James Rolfe, digging into that kind of relationship of the desire to be a creator, how that has evolved from that kind of traditional media world, as James Rolfe being one of the earliest to do it, in his desire to be like a quote-unquote legitimate filmmaker, how that reflected Dan Olson's own kind of trajectory, how what is it to be a person who creates content on the internet, what does that do for your self-esteem and your relationship to the arts and all these kinds of things. And that the parasocial relationship dynamic to it, and the ways in which we project so much onto these people we see online because we have a sense of affinity and a closeness to them that we do not have for Paul Thomas Anderson, the director of One Battle After Another, right? Like, your relationship to the director of a film you see in the movie theater is so fundamentally different than your relationship for a content creator on YouTube whose channel you subscribe to. And the language we use to refer to them, like the psychology of it, all of it is wildly different, which is why I think that people have a gut reaction that a video like this and this sort of genre or style content doesn't belong on these lists, is because we mentally put it in such a different box. But I think that video that Dan Olson put out is such an incredible, artistic, complicated exploration of that idea and that issue and the friction between traditional film and online video and all this kind of stuff. Without, my favorite thing about that video is he comes to no direct conclusion about it. It is the video itself is an exploration. The form of the video itself is an exploration of all those anxieties. It was just, when I watched that, I was fucking absolutely blown away. And it made me reconsider and think about my assumptions for these kinds of videos. And what kind of cultural importance and relevance we put on them. And I think, yeah, absolutely. Again, not having seen this one, but assuming based on having seen her old stuff, that it is of the quality that you attest to it, that it would belong on this list and certainly could be a number one.
Well, I agree with everything you just said, and I do want to be clear. If you want to watch this is on YouTube. It's not just on Nebula, because it was tied to a fundraiser for the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund that has so far grossed over $800,000, I believe. It's been a big success as a fundraiser, which is awesome. So you can go watch this for free. You don't need to sign up for Nebula if anyone is interested in finding it. But I agree with everything you just said, Sean, and like I've come close to pulling the trigger on this before, where I include a video essay on a top 10 list. The Dan Olson one, that was one I thought about. Lindsay Ellis had a video on Nebula. It was either last year or the year before, where it was about John Lennon and Yoko Ono. And it was particularly about the way Yoko Ono was demonized over the last few decades, and the way that is kind of a synecdoche for the entire misogynist bent of our culture. And that's just a straight documentary. It's almost hard to even call it a video essay, because she is just doing like documentarian work in that video. And I thought about putting that high on a top 10 list. And this was the one that made me finally pull the trigger. And I've also I think about this a lot. You will not find someone who is more pro theatrical experience than me. I hope my bona fides on that are well established by now. But I am also someone who understands, I think, the way the times are moving, and I am interested in it. I say this a lot. A formative moment for me as a film student was me remembering I was in a film history class, and the professor talked about what she believed cinema to be. And she said, cinema is when you're in a dark theater and there's a film playing and you're with an audience all watching it together. That's cinema. Everything else is something different. And I remember, now this was a long time ago. This was like 2014, 2013. But even then I remember thinking, oh, then cinema's dead. Because that's not cinema. The cinema is a lot, or if it could be cinema, but if that's our definition, then that definition is of a historical thing that survives the way opera survives.
Yeah, or like
as a
vaudeville, you know?
Right? And I believe cinema can expand and can be something new, and that it is something that is, like, not even can, I just think observationally it is a thing in a period of mass transformation. And one of the classes I taught last semester was about this. It was called Video Game Worlds and Cinematic Expansion. It was sort of about a media convergence class, but with kind of my own spin on it. And I felt a lot of anxiety when I was teaching that class, because we didn't get a ton of student enrollment, in part because we had trouble figuring out what the title of it was going to be. I think we could do a better job at that side of it. But I had about 10 students in it, and I had a little bit of anxiety because everything I was doing in that class was stuff I'd never seen another teacher do. So I had no, like, apprenticeship for that. I was doing stuff like playing a Digimon game and going through the DLC of Dragon Ball Z Kakarot and comparing it to the History of Trunks special, and just a lot of stuff that was, like, very experimental. And I was worried a lot that, like, I wasn't doing a good job. And at the end of that semester, I got the most enthusiastic response I've ever gotten to a class. Like, every student in that class, to a person, was telling me, like, I've never had a class like this. I've wanted a class like this. This feels like the first class I've taken here that is, like, of the present, that, like, they were saying you should have more on the curriculum, like, as a department about this. And so I've been thinking about that a lot, and, like, yeah, I'm not that old, but I'm older enough than my students that, like, if I'm only teaching the stuff that I've been taught, I'm out of step with them now. Because that's how fast things are moving. And so even something as small as, like, putting this as my number one film is me kind of starting to grapple with, like, how do we understand film and media in the 2020s? Because it is different than we understood in the 2010s or 2000s, let alone the 20th century, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. It just makes you think about, I said earlier, like, when we were talking about, that film and video games are these, like, tiny blips in the history so far of human art and human culture. And that, when we think about literature, broadly speaking, as like this very long tradition that has a huge culture going back thousands of years, we like instinctively, people in the literature world include things like Homer's The Odyssey. Like, you can't make a list of canonical texts without including Homer's The Odyssey. The only problem with that is that it's not a text, really. People wrote it down, and that's how it survived. But it is a spoken word project. Like, that is what it is. That's what it was created to be. That's what it was always designed to be. We have only this version that was written down, which is one of however God many knows versions of the Odyssey that ever were spoken when it was a relevant contemporary piece of art back in, the 8th century BC in ancient Greece. And it's just like the ways in which, I think it's very easy to take for granted when you look at a historical perspective that it's easy to just sort of throw in stuff like Homer's The Odyssey, or we also do it with Shakespeare as well. That one is, I think I would contest a little bit more, because I think it's very unfair to the world of theater to just sort of say, which is still
just
very...
claim Shakespeare for yourself.
Just bring in Shakespeare and be like, oh, it's just an English literature thing. It's Shakespeare. It's like, well, maybe, hey, let's, like, theater could be its own thing, and I'm happy to teach it in an English class, and have theater be one of the things we cover in our class, but as I think of theater, not as like a quote-unquote book.
Right.
But with the Odyssey, we don't, there is no attempt, because it would be very weird. I've never seen a class, maybe at like a very high university level, where you're literally learning ancient Greek in order to learn how to read the, like, original texts, which is a much higher level than I ever went to with that kind of stuff. Maybe then you are hearing it, or like doing that level of it, that it's actually like an oral version. But nobody fucking teaches the Odyssey as an oral thing. And so, just the point of all this is that art evolves, and what we consider to be art evolves. And I think it is totally fair to say that the Odyssey is, broadly speaking, a piece of literature. And when we refer to old oral poetry and the epic poem and that kind of stuff, that we put it in the world of literature with all the other things that have been influenced by those. And so I think it is just exactly the same to say that is fair that something that is a piece of moving imagery that is meant to convey a message to an audience in some way, shape, or form, that exists in the same sphere as any of these other movies that are on your list. Like, why make that distinction off of something that is predominantly a business model, not a thing that is like inherent to the piece of art itself?
Yeah. Couldn't have said it better myself, and I've been talking for a while. So, Sean, I will say that's my stuff, and I will hand it over to you for what I'm assuming will be the Digimon filibuster.
Yeah, so I wrote on my part of the list Digimon stuff, and I made a couple of bullet points. So people would obviously should remember, because I talked about it briefly last time, that I was playing Digimon Story Time Stranger, the long-awaited sequel. 10-year later sequel, 8-year in development, as I now know, for the game Digimon Story Time Stranger is a sequel to Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth, and then also it's sort of like side game, spin-off game, however you want to refer to it, Digimon Story Hackers Memory, both of which are incredible games. Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth in particular obviously made a big splash on our podcast 10 years ago. You one of my most memorable moments of us recording podcasts is you dynamically live on air moving Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth up to be your number one game of that year. And as someone who is currently replaying Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth, I could say this is a good choice. It's a hell of a game. Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth. It turns out that game was really fucking good.
Yes.
Yeah, and so like through Time Stranger, I have just gone down such a fucking deep goddamn Digimon rabbit hole over the past several weeks. It started a little bit before winter break. It went into absolute fucking insane overdrive over winter break. And so just to give my table of contents up front, I'm going to talk about here Digimon Story Time Stranger, which I have played to completion, including getting all of the Digimon in that game. I'm going to talk about Digimon Ghost Game, the animated series that premiered a few years ago. It started premiering in October 2021, finished March 2023 with 67 episodes, which I have watched to completion. And I'm also going to talk about Digimon Beatbreak, which is the show currently airing that recently finished its first cours. I haven't watched the most recent episode, but I've watched the first 12 episodes of that show, which come to a nice kind of conclusion, but is ongoing.
Is Ghost Game the one Miyuki Sawashiro was in?
Yes.
I remember her being the lead in one of these. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And I will talk about the voice cast of that show is fucking incredible. And talking about the voice cast, I do have to shout out up top the woman of the hour, which is Tamara Mutsumi, who we would know on this podcast as a voice actress who played Miss Kobayashi on Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid. And she is in a starring role in all three of these things. She is the Digimon lady. She plays Aigiyomon in Digimon Story Time Stranger, which is effectively the lead character. Not your player character, but your kind of like sidekick, who's the character that the story's really about, because you're kind of like playing an avatar for yourself, who's a silent lead. She is Hiro, the protagonist of Digimon Ghost Game, who is the Digimon tamer effectively for the Digimon played by Sawashiro Miyuki. And then she's not the main character, but she's one of the main Digimon in the group, the kind of core 4 humans who each have their partner Digimon. She's one of the partner Digimon in Digimon Beatbreak. And so I've been hearing a lot of Tamara Mutsumi's voice for the past couple of weeks, and it just really cracked me up that she is in all this fucking Digimon stuff. But anyway, so that's all the big picture of the Digimon stuff I've been doing. Let's start with Digimon Story Time Stranger. And Digimon Story Time Stranger is a very interesting game. And I'm going to say up front that I do prefer Cyber Sleuth ultimately, but they are kind of like different games, and they're two games that have a very different approach to the Digimon franchise. Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth is very much in the Digimon Tamers style, which is the third Digimon show. That's the one that's kind of like fucked up and has all the Cthulhu style stuff, written by Chiaki Konaka, who we've talked about recently with the writer of The Big O and stuff like that. And that show, the first half of Digimon Tamers is all Digimon have come into our world. They are in our world in like kind of secret, and it's about the Digidestined or the chosen kids or whatever term you want to reuse for them, the Digimon Tamers. I'm trying to deal with that. Eventually they do go to the digital world, but that's a relatively small part of Tamers. And that's very much what Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth was like, where it was all about this sort of like near future world with this crazy kind of like VR. They used, having replayed the first dozen hours or so of Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth, I was shocked shocked to see them use the word metaverse in a game that came out in 2016 and being like, oh my God, this is a metaverse game. That is what it's about Digimon existing in the virtual reality and all that kind of stuff. And then eventually the digital world stuff comes in. Digimon Story Time Stranger is much more like traditional Digimon, things like Digimon Adventure 1, 2, which is much more about we are people from our world who end up going into the digital world, and there's a much bigger focus on us being in the digital world, going on adventures, interacting with the Digimon in their own world and their own environment, and you're kind of like a stranger in a strange land kind of story. Digimon Adventure 1 is straight up an isekai anime. I mean, that's just completely what it is. And I personally kind of prefer, honestly, the Digimon type narratives that are more like Cyber Sleuth or more like Digimon Tamers. As much as I like the original Digimon Adventure, I think like there's something really cool and interesting that can be explored about this narrative of the Digimon mostly being in our world and really playing up the digital monster aspect of them. And that's kind of a personal preference. I know that there are lots of Digimon fans that don't particularly like that version of Digimon. And so if you are a Digimon fan for whom like your main thing you like is the isekai narrative style, like it's about a person going into the digital world, meeting all the Digimon, going on a big wacky adventure, seeing all the crazy locales of the digital world, that's Digimon Story Time Stranger through and through. To the point where you have Aigyomon, the character played by Tamada Mutsumi, who's basically like a partner Digimon, a la Agumon and Taichi in the Digimon Adventure, Guilmon, and whoever the main kid was, I'm blanking on his name, in Digimon Tamers, the traditional Digimon setup where you have like one kind of static, this is a proper main character Digimon, who is just there in your party for the first half of the game and then in elements of the second half, who you don't like evolve, you don't do any of that stuff. He's like his own character. And in that respect, there is something very cool about Time Stranger, that it is trying to do a very different kind of Digimon story and is able to explore that story. The basic narrative setup then is that your character is a kind of agent for this mysterious organization called Adamus that investigates like mysterious unexplained phenomena, and you are sent to investigate a phenomena related to these, I think they call them phase electron life forms, which are Digimon that have started popping up in our world. That leads you into this sort of like crazy series of events that leads to a giant portal opening up and Digimon flooding through and causing what is referred to as the Shinjuku Inferno, which is basically the fucking Armageddon. Like the world is being ravaged by these Digimon that invade our world. And in that process, your character ends up traveling backwards 8 years in time, and kind of starts to investigate the causes of what led up to this Shinjuku Inferno that caused seemingly the end of civilization as we know it. And when you get sent back 8 years in time, you meet a girl named Inori, and you meet then a Digi-Egg that hatches, that comes out with a Digimon that becomes Aigyomon. And so you're investigating with this girl Inori, who lost her younger brother to a Digimon-related event, and this young boy-looking Digimon named Aigyomon that kind of becomes her partner. And so much of the story is about the relationship between Inori and Aigyomon, where Aigyomon is kind of like a pseudo-replacement for this brother she lost in some event that happened in the past. And so there's a lot of story here about like that kind of grief and how you deal with that grief, and like what kind of pressure it puts on someone when they are, he's not doing it intentionally, but like he's inevitably positioned as this sort of like pseudo younger brother to her because that's what he looks like. In order to hide his horns that he has, because he's a little kind of like Puck or Pan looking figure, he has to put on the hoodie that her brother used to wear and put the hood up. And so it's like very explicit about like the way he's being doubled for her deceased younger brother. And very quickly after you meet them in the 8 years in the past, you end up stuck in the digital world with them, investigating these incidents. And it's a very interesting structure because you're then in the digital world for the full first half of the game. You go to every major locale. It kind of reminds me a little bit structurally like Dragon Quest XI, where you kind of travel around the world. You have these little narratives that you do in each place that are kind of thematized around this conflict between two factions of Digimon, the Titans, which are the bad guys, and then the regular Digimon in this world called Ilias. It's all of it's kind of themed around Greek and Roman mythology stuff, and this kind of eternal war between these two figures that ultimately is going to lead to the destruction of the world. And you're kind of piecing together how that's going to happen by visiting all these different factions and stuff. At the midpoint of the game, you then end up traveling back 8 years into the future, into an alternate future that you have changed, that's not the original one you came from, but is also this kind of dystopian world in a different way, where Digimon have ended up in the world. They're kind of like in a Digimon ghetto, which is a really interesting idea that they never really explore. I wish they did more with it, because there's like a sectioned off part of Tokyo that all the Digimon have to be contained in. There's like a secret Digimon police force that like goes and tries to like wrangle up all the Digimon and put them in the Digimon ghetto. They don't go super deep into that plot line, but that's the kind of world you end up into that you've changed by going back to the past. That's what the future now is.
Digimon Ghetto sounds like the most depressing Digimon anime of all time. We got Digimon Adventure, Digimon Tamers, Digimon Ghost Game, Digimon Ghetto. Oh yes. God, what happened?
It's just it's really wild when Agumon digivolves into Schindlermon. It's like and helps them all get out. It's really crazy.
Are we gonna get canceled for that joke?
Look, the world's a fucked up place. I gotta have my dark humor, okay?
Okay.
When I'm talking about my Digimon.
That was anyway. Sean Chapman's joke. I do not necessarily condone or condemn it. I'm gonna wait and see how this turns out.
Okay. Anyway, so in that 8 years future, you are separated from Agumon. So this is one of like the really interesting parts of the structure of the game, is that you do this like part 1 Dragon Quest XI style, like you visit all these places 8 years in the past where the digital world is in conflict but is relatively fine. It's on the brink of bad shit happening, but the bad shit hasn't happened yet. You kind of fail to really prevent it, but you change the way in which things happen. And so the whole second half of the game is you in this sort of alternate 8-year future where you're now separated from Inori and Agumon, and you are on your own, and you then on your own have to go revisit all these different places, both in the real world and more importantly in the digital world, and you see how all these characters you met have all been fucked up by all the shit, crazy shit that has happened that you have missed because you time traveled and you skipped past it with your 8 years of time travel. And then you get these like a bunch of mini time travel stories where in each of those sort of original places you went to, you have to like use a little kind of mini time travel where you see this tragedy unfold, and then you time travel back like a day in the past or whatever to prevent that specific tragedy, to build up a cadre of all the Digimon you need, keep them safe and powerful, so that way you can bring them all together to defeat Chronomon, who is the ultimate villain, who's this Digimon that controls time and all this stuff. If you are into Digimon lore, there is like, you don't have to care about it. It goes like super deep. Not in a level that like, if you don't give a shit, it's distracting. But if you want to go on wikis and read a bunch of shit, you're like, oh my god, there's a bunch of Digimon lore stuff. You can go down a deep fucking rabbit hole. That I did not go all the way down it. I sort of, teased around the rabbit hole. I was like, that's a cool rabbit hole. And I'm going to leave it there and admire it from a distance, because I've got a lot of shit going on right now. And so that's the kind of narrative setup. And the way it plays out in game, I think, is the first half is a little dull. Like, it's still fun from a gameplay perspective, which I'll talk about the gameplay stuff, and getting all of your Digimon, leveling them up, digivolving them, all that shit is obviously incredibly fun. But narratively, that first half is a little dull. But it ends up paying off really well in the second half, kind of like Dragon Quest XI again. I think Dragon Quest XI has a better first half, but the way in which, like, there's a really nice sense of narrative build to this game, and the sense of like isolation you get when Aigumon's just not with you anymore and Inori's not there and it's just you and you're wandering around this world totally alone. Aigumon also in terms of gameplay is a very powerful Digimon who's always with you as a fourth member of your party, and all of a sudden he's just not fucking there and you're like, oh fuck, I did not realize how much I was relying on this character in every single battle, and now all of that I have to handle on my own. Like, it does make the second half of this game, I think, really, really fun narratively, and it's where, like, the meat of the game is. So if you start playing Time Stranger and you're, like, not totally into it narratively, but you're enjoying the gameplay, that's where I was at for the first probably, like, 15 hours or so of the game. But I will say I think the story gets substantially better. That being
said, how long was it in total for you? I'm curious.
Oh, probably 50 to 60 hours total. And I did every side quest. I got all the Digimon. If you mainline the game, it's probably 30 hours kind of mainlining it, more or less.
So it's not a crazy long JRPG. It's normal.
Yeah, it's a reasonable. It's not Persona like, it is a much more kind of like, it is a very consumable game in that way. It does not take up your whole life. It's how I was able to finish it in over the course of like 3 weeks. I mean, I finished it like halfway through my winter break. So anyway, so in terms of the narrative stuff, one thing I'll say is that is another kind of negative, or a thing that like was disappointing to me about the game coming from Cyber Sleuth. And it's the main negative that kind of touches different elements of the game. And it becomes really clear when you play Cyber Sleuth, is that the game, I think, has a little bit of a problem where it is biting off more it can chew from a production point of view. And it's very clear that this game had a very troubled production. And I've since seen some interviews on the official Digimon YouTube channel in Japan, where they have a VTuber Digimon called Terriermon Assistant. That's a little Terriermon in a white lab. A lot of their videos are also subtitled in English, so if you want to go see some interviews. But there's a lot of interviews with the producer of the game and stuff. They talk about it. And the game it's been in development for 8 years, whatever this version of the game is. It clearly was like a very hard game for this team to make, because Digimon Story, Cyber Sleuth, and Hacker's Memory are Vita games that were also on the PS4. But those games are cheap games. They're budget games from the perspective of like the games that AAA video games we think of. They are not competing in that space. They're not trying to be the next fucking Final Fantasy, 13 or 14 or 15 or whatever.
They're not weird to like you and me, Sean, who've played a lot of this kind of stuff, or to many of our listeners, I'm guessing, but they would be kind of, I'll say, like, for instance, when I showed Digimon Cyber Sleuth to my students last year, they were a little surprised to see that on a modern console, because they probably haven't played a lot of games that look like that. Yeah,
and it's like, it's a game that has, like, all the areas you go to are very small and contained, and very kind of like boxed little hallways you go to are like the quote-unquote dungeons in Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth. The narrative presentation model style of that game is very visual novel influenced, where you just have like a big text box at the bottom. You have 3D models. They're not 2D character portraits, but they're like 3D models of the characters that come up close to the camera, and the background kind of fades out, and then they animate very slightly as you get through the text. And that is a very cheap looking model if you're someone that's not used to it, but it's a presentation model that is great for these kinds of games because you can do lots of stuff without having to spend lots of money on it. And so you get to have lots of fun, weird side quests in Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth that feel like they're basically as well as fully produced as basically anything else in the game, outside of they don't have full voice acting, because the presentation model is so lo-fi and so kind of abstracted for everything that you don't feel a dissonance between the different areas of the content of the game or anything like that. It's one of the big advantages of that kind of leaner style of production. Again, there's certain players that will be alienated by it, but if you're not alienated by it like we aren't, it's all it is really is like huge advantages. And I think it's way better for this kind of game.
That's what made us fall in love with Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth. I think before you, because that game doesn't really reveal what an interesting story it is for a while. What it is it's this world where you get to be the Cyber Sleuth, and it's like, hey, there's Digimon fucking up the computer. Can you go into the computer and check them out? And it's like there's a million versions of that in that game that are so fun. And it's like, yeah, it's a definite model that, like, the Nintendo Switch allows for it to a certain degree, but definitely since the PlayStation Vita died, there's a dearth of this kind of game because there isn't that dedicated but slightly more powerful than like a DS handheld space that the Vita kind of gave us, that gave us other games too, like Gravity Rush and stuff.
Yeah. And so Time Stranger, I do think as a game, as much as I love it, and I do really love it, is a victim of that, like the production was much more ambitious and wanting to be something that more is on the scale of like a modern game where you have big 3D cutscenes that I suspect were probably motion captured. I don't know for sure, but they look like they were motion captured. There's not a shit ton of them, but they do have them. You have much more complicated big 3D environments you're moving through. There are a couple of pretty cool dungeons. There's one, the Gear Forest, that I think that is actually like a very cool dungeon area that has a gimmick. That's the kind of thing that Cyber Sleuth didn't really have all that much of, partially because they're bigger 3D areas. It's certainly not an open world game or anything like that, but just compared to the very simplistic small boxing environments you're in something like Cyber Sleuth, it's much, much more expanded compared to something like that. And so there are some things that are advantageous about it, but the cost of it is that I think the side content in the game is just so much worse than it was in Cyber Sleuth, because you don't have the kind of like visual novel thing. It's much more like you're just a 3D character running around in a 3D environment. You walk up to someone, you press the X button or whatever to talk to them, and you just get a text box at the bottom of the screen, and you're just looking at the 3D models living in that world. And it's just like not a great way to present side content in that kind of stuff in these games, because you don't have, and I don't think there's any way the studio could handle doing something like Mass Effect or The Witcher 3 or the Horizon games, where you have a dynamic 3D camera system for each of those dialogues and like over the shoulder shots and all that kind of stuff. Like, that's a whole complicated system that studio would have to design for those kinds of conversations and stuff. But you also then don't get something like Persona with like stylist 2D portrait arts with different expressions of the character, or something like Cyber Sleuth, where you just bring the 3D characters right up into the camera and have them do some simple expressions. But those, as lo-fi as something like those traditional kind of visual novel narrative sequence are, they have a lot of personality. They allow you to inject a lot of personality into the text and stuff like that. And so there is something very disappointing, and it makes the side content feel so slim in this game that all it is you get these little text boxes at the bottom, and it leads to the side characters in the game not being able to pop as much as they should, because the characters are as good on paper as the characters in Cyber Sleuth. And any of the main narrative content they're involved in, they're absolutely as good as the characters in Cyber Sleuth. And I think Cyber Sleuth had great characters. And there are characters in this, like Dr. Simmons is probably my favorite, who this series of games definitely has a fetish for like hot, weird, discombobulated blonde ladies, because there's the hot, weird, discombobulated blonde lady, Detective Kurumi, who's the head of the Kurumi agency that you're part of in the original Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth. They have a very similar kind of lady in this, but she's like a scientist that investigates Digimon stuff, initially for the government, and then she's part of like the resistance when you're in the like weird dystopian future. And she's a great character. It's Endo Aya plays her. It is a great performance, and it's a very fun character. There's an Ishikawa Yui character. I'm blanking on the character's name, but she's like a secret agent lady that helps out Dr. Simmons. And it's like the characters are really colorful and really fun, but they just don't get the extra level of life they get in something like Cyber Sleuth, because the side content is not as sort of like vivacious as it was. It doesn't have that kind of sense of vitality to it. And so if I were to level one complaint at Time Stranger, that is my biggest complaint. And I think that there are lots of players, and I've seen online, there are lots of players for whom that does not bother them at all. They don't really care about that. And for whom they thought that stuff in Cyber Sleuth was slow and boring. And if you were someone who didn't like that element of Cyber Sleuth and like those people feel it's slow and boring, which I can understand why if it's not your cup of tea, I think you will like Time Stranger's version of this a lot more, because it's a very quick, snappy, you get whatever rewards you get from the side mission, you get a little nugget of story, and then you move on. You're not spending a lot of time on it. As someone coming from Cyber Sleuth for whom that was one of my favorite parts of Cyber Sleuth, there's like, just especially replaying it, it's like, oh my god, these side quests are great and weird. And I haven't gotten to it yet, but I'm very excited to get to the incredibly dark side story that's in Cyber Sleuth about the like gang of fucking like people stealing people's organs when they're logged into the cyberspace, and they're like selling organs on the black market. Oh my god! Like Cyber Sleuth gets so fucked up, and it's great. Time Stranger just doesn't go there. And so that's something I was disappointed about with the game. Something that's not disappointing about the game, though, is the Digimon stuff is fucking great. There is an insane number of Digimon. There's like 450-something Digimon in the game, over twice as many Digimon as are in Cyber Sleuth. It's just fucking bonkers. There's so many of them. And at first I was a little bit bummed that they do some stuff that kind of removes some of the friction stuff that was in Cyber Sleuth. And early on I was a little bit bummed by it. I think it makes sense when you get deeper into the game that like the sheer quantity of Digimon that exist makes sense that like you can now, for instance, Digivolve anywhere in the world. Like you do not have to go to your like kind of Velvet Room equivalent. There is a Velvet Room equivalent, but that's just for the Digifarm. You don't have to go there to Digivolve. The Digifarm is much more simplistic. That was like a whole... You spent like fucking hours in Cyber Sleuth dealing with that stuff. Here, it's purely as a way for you to basically get stats on Digimon to do specific Digivolutions. It's not like an experience farm, which was what it was kind of for in the original. Like, you do not have the restrictions on how many Digimon you can carry around with you, like in Cyber Sleuth, where you could only have a certain number and there was like a memory slot mechanic. Here you can only have 6 in your party active that are 3 active members and 3 like rear group members. But if you want to have all your Digimon on, you can just have all of them. Eventually that becomes overwhelming and you start putting them in the Digifarm because you just can't deal with having hundreds of Digimon on your person at any given moment. And so it is definitely a very streamlined system. And there's a lot of stuff about that I like a lot about the more kind of cumbersome friction style mechanics in Cyber Sleuth. And I might personally prefer it a little bit more, but it fits much better with the overall game they made. It's not like they just didn't just kind of like mindlessly say, we should make all this shit easier to do. They thought about like, what is our overall goals for this kind of game? It is much more you're on a big adventure, so you're not going back to locations all the time like you are in Cyber Sleuth. You've got so many Digimon. So it feels like all the things they rethought about how the Digimon evolutions work, the way that inheriting skills work, where now you can, instead of having to obsessively go, and if you wanted to say get a heal skill on a specific Digimon that wasn't going to get it in their normal path through evolving. In Cyber Sleuth, if you're like, I really want heal on this Digimon, you had to like look at your fucking chart, find one thing that you could eventually get them to by de-digivolving them down multiple steps and then going along a different line that they would eventually get heal, and then go back the other way to bring them back to the original one you had because you wanted it on that specific Digimon. Now, any of those inherited skills that are basic universal ones like heal, do basic fire damage, those attacks, those are things that Digimon learn from leveling up, but you can unequip them and re-equip them. So you basically get them as like an item from that Digimon. And so again, it simplifies that mechanic, but for the kind of game they're making, I think it just works better for this game. So it ends up being kind of like it's a lot more different from Cyber Sleuth in that respect than I thought at first. But I think it like ends up working well, and it kind of makes it fun to play both the games back to back in terms of how they deal with the combat and raising Digimon, because they have a very different feel, even if the most basic mechanics are the same. So you can still take any Digimon and through the systems turn them into any other Digimon in the game. It is still that level of complexity of you're going all up and down that chart and going fucking bonkers. You're just doing it in a slightly different way. And I do think a big highlight of the game is that the Digimon models look fucking great. And there are a shit ton of them. It is like incredible to me the amount of detail they put into each one, and like the animations on them. There's voice acting on the Digimon as well, that they like kind of say their attack moves, which is something that Cyber Sleuth did not do, which is important to me because I feel like it's important to the identity of Digimon as a franchise that the Digimon fucking talk. They're not dumb like Pokemon. You can have a conversation with your Agumon if you want to. And so there's something that like it makes them feel more alive in many ways in Time Stranger. There's a cool personality mechanic where you can interact with the Digimon just through like basic text prompts and stuff like that. But like they kind of influence, oh, this Digimon's more brave, this Digimon's more intellectual. And what personality you kind of influence them to changes what stats they get when they level up. So if you want to get into the fucking weeds with Digimon raising in this game, there are some deep, like vast fields of weeds you can wander off into, way deeper than I went, because when you beat the game, you unlock like a bunch of difficulty options if you want to go back and just go absolutely fucking bonkers. I just played through the game so far once on hard. I'm replaying Cyber Sleuth. I am feeling a powerful urge to kind of want to play Cyber Sleuth and another playthrough of Time Stranger at the same time in a perverse way, because Cyber Sleuth, the story stuff, I think is just definitively better. Like for me, in my taste, like I think the story and how they do it in Cyber Sleuth is so fucking good. But Time Stranger, there's an addictiveness to the way they do the Digimon stuff, and because it's such a smooth version of it, that I kind of want to be doing both. But yeah, overall Digimon Story, Time Stranger, it kind of fits into, and we'll talk about this when we do the top 10 games of the year. My kind of overall thesis for this year in games to me is that there's a lot of games that are sequels to games that are like good, but are not like huge leaps over quality in that original game, or sometimes a little bit worse. So far, again, I would say I prefer Cyber Sleuth overall, but that is not to put Time Stranger down too much. I still think that if you are someone who is even vaguely interested in this kind of monster raising JRPG, this is a must-play game. Whatever Pokemon, whatever came out, who gives a shit? Fucking that don't got no Omegamon in it. That don't got no Agumon. you want to play a real fucking monster raising game, you got to get your Digimon, and Pokemon can go fuck itself. That's my stance here. It's always been my stance in my heart. And Digimon Story's Time Stranger is still that game for me.
Pokemon Legends ZA will be on my top 10 list. So
I'm sure
I guess we can hash that out then. Okay.
From someone who put, Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth as your number one game of 2016 and never played Hacker's Memory and has not played Digimon Story.
I played like 50 hours of Hacker's Memory. I just didn't beat it. And I do feel bad about that, but I did buy that game and I did play a substantial amount of it.
Okay. Well, you never finished it.
So I never finished it. I feel bad about that. I haven't played Time Stranger yet. I am hoping it gets a Switch 2 port so I can just play it there, because I'm sure will. Because here's the thing, like the way I played the first two, the Cyber Sleuth and Hacker's Memory, is I had both the Vita and PS4 versions because I liked to take it on the go. So it would be weird to me to play one locked to the PS5 because that's not how the other two were for me. So I'm hoping for a Switch port.
Yeah, I'm also hoping that they use this, they do a Hacker's Memory style game with this, because there's just so, like, the Digimon part of it's so good, and there's so many Digimon. And one of the great things about these games is because there's so many Digimon, and because the way it works is that it's not like Pokemon, where in Pokemon you're limited to access whatever Pokemon they, in whatever like kind of root structure they have, right? Like when you're starting out Pokemon and your favorite Pokemon is Farfetch'd, you can't just get Farfetch'd right away, right? And there's obviously, it's a little bit different because in Digimon you have like long strings of evolutions and stuff like that. But in Digimon, if your favorite thing is like Digimon Tamers was my favorite show, I saw it as a kid, I love Guilmon, Terriermon, and Renamon and their evolutions, which were the main ones from that show, like you can very quickly, in a couple of hours, get those Digimon and start on that path. And it means that like when you replay these games, unless you're like intentionally deciding to use the same Digimon you did last time, you're not going to end up with the same Digimon as the ones you're using most of the time. This thing that's fun about playing Cyber Sleuth is I'm like intentionally saying I'm not going to use Agumon, I'm not going to use Gabumon, the main guys from Digimon Adventure. That is the show I grew up with. I'm going to intentionally go off and pick some weirder, more off the beaten path Digimon or from shows that I haven't watched, and develop affection for them. And that's one of the reasons why I want to play Time Strangers. I'm like, I never used Renamon and her evolutions in Time Stranger, and she's one of my favorite Digimon from Tamers, and stuff like that. So I really hope they do a like Hacker's Memory style spin-off game that just comes out in a couple of years, adds on another 100 Digimon, does a whole different crazy story in this world. It doesn't have to be time travel related if it doesn't want to be. Honestly, I'd be thrilled if they did the same thing as Hacker's Memory, where you just play as some dope that lives in the world, which is my favorite thing about that game, is you're just some dude. You're not like the Cyber Sleuth. You're not like a weird guy who's been turned into a cyber man, or in Time Stranger, you're not like a secret agent that goes and travels through time. You're just a fucking guy who stumbled into a thing and got a Digimon. You're like, well, I guess I gotta deal with this shit. And that's it.
In my memory, I think because he does kind of look like you, honestly, the protagonist of Hacker's Memory is just you, Sean. Like, that's in my memory. It's just Sean Chapman running around playing Digimon. Not like you're a character in Digimon. It's you. Maybe you've taken a trip to Japan, but it's just all of what you are, but now you're in a Digimon adventure.
Because that's just kind of what he is. He's just a regular guy. It's the great thing about that fucking game. Anyways, that's my Digimon Story spiel. You'll hear a little bit more about it on the top 10 list, because it's definitely on there. But I'm happy I was able to talk about it. It was a thing that was the main reason when you texted me about, like, do you want to switch up the order we do the podcast on? I'm like, yes, that's great, because I don't want to have to only talk about this game on a top 10 list, so I'm happy to do this.
Yeah, and you would have had to talk about the negatives, but in a top 10 setting, and that always feels weird, so yeah,
exactly.
Definitely.
Anyways, but that's not the only Digimon thing I did, by any stretch of the imagination, because I've got two other things to talk about. The big one I really want to talk about, because this show fucking rules, and I just didn't know how good it was until I got far enough into it, and that is Digimon Ghost Game. So again, this is the show that aired weekly from October 2021 to March 2023. It is a 67 episode show, and that is goddammit, that's what anime should be. It's like, just make an episode a week and just fucking rip these things out it's a fucking 5-course show, man. That's hardcore shit to be doing in the 2020s, and I mad respect it. This is actually a show I started watching almost a year ago. It was probably like March-ish last year. and I watched about the first 10 episodes. And the main reason I watched it is because the main Digimon, Gamamon, is voiced by Sawashiro Miyuki. And when they announced the show, they said that. And, for those of you who don't know anything about that, well, listen to next week's episode as well, when on the top 10 list. And I talk about her every year as my Sawashiro Miyuki's Award for Peculiar Excellence. And it's like, oh, she's playing a fucking little dinosaur boy, which is not the kind of character she normally plays. Gamamon is so far outside your kind of like the standard set of characters you think of for a Sawashiro Miyuki character. She's much more of a Fujiko Mine, sexy spy lady kind of thing. And it was a very eye-popping, kind of eye-catching sort of casting announcement. And so I watched some of it last year, and Ghost Game has a little bit of a rough start, and it doesn't really hit its stride until about episode 12. But once it does, the show fucking kicks ass. Basically, the setup of the show, and the pitch of the show to me is this is a Digimon show that is almost completely episodic. It only has a very, very thin overarching storyline that picks up in a couple of places. But it is very much about individual one-off episodes that are all Monster of the Week episodes, and they are all horror themed. And for me, the easy elevator pitch for it is Digimon meets Monster of the Week X-Files, and this is the TV show you make, and it's fucking hell yeah. Now, it takes it about the first core for it to totally lock into that mode. There's a couple of episodes in that first set of 10 or 12 episodes that aren't really enough in that kind of horror camp or don't execute it on it well enough, and it feels like the show takes a bit to kind of commit. But once it commits, it gets fucking kick ass, because this is a show that does not pull its punches. It is a show that, is still a kid's show. Aesthetically, everything about it is a little kid's show. But it kind of exists a little bit in that same world as, Courage the Cowardly Dog, which is one of my favorite cartoons growing up, in that it's just fucked up. And partially because it looks like a kid's show, it just gets very fucked up. And there are some, pretty intense stories in this show. And most of them are kind of one-off episodes that are riffing on some kind of specific horror story or horror subgenre. And, you have some of your, kind of major ones with, here's a zombie episode, here's a vampire episode, some of, the big subgenres. But it also gets pretty particular, where, one of my favorites is there's a doppelganger episode that is, particularly creepy. Where if you did that exact episode, particularly the first half of it, the second half starts to get a little bit into comedy once the doppelganger thing gets fully revealed. But the first half, where they're going for the creepy vibes, if it was live action, and instead of it being a little dinosaur cartoon thing, Gamamon, that gets doppelgangered, and there's a creepy other version of him that's sort of slowly taking his place in the world, and Gamamon can't do anything about it. If that was an 8-year-old live action boy with a real child actor, it would be fucking horrifying and really creepy shit. Of the opening of that episode is Gamamon is I'm gonna go to the park and play with my friend. Which, by the way, the Digimon stuff is Digimon coming into our world, and so all of it is our main characters get their Digimon friends. I'll talk about who the Digimon friends are in a second, and they use those Digimon friends as allies to help them solve these paranormal incidents that occur when other Digimon break out into our world. So it's very much that kind of thing. You only go to the digital world at the very, very end of the show. So Gamamon, he's hanging out with Hiro and his little kind of dorm, goes Hiro, I'm going to go to the park. And he flies out and goes to the park. And as soon as he flies away, there's a knock at the door. And Hiro's what? Gamamon just left. You just hear this Hiro, it's me. Open the door. And it's this voice that's kind of sounds like Gamamon, but kind of not. And when Hiro opens the door, you get this brief, really quick, almost kind of jump scare of this weird pair of eyes straight into the camera. And then it's clear that Hiro's almost hypnotized or something, and he just lets this thing fly in. And the camera is so good in the editing of you can kind of see this thing that looks like Gamamon coming into the room, but it kind of doesn't. And you never get to see its face. And it's just sitting in the back of the frame while Hiro's at his desk doing work or something. And it's just back there sitting, and you just can't quite see it. And then as soon as Gamamon starts coming back, it just sort of flies away. And then regular Gamamon comes in, and Hiro, it's doesn't have any idea. He can't kind of put together what the fuck's happening here. And slowly, as these incidents keep occurring with this strange thing that you never quite get a good look at, everyone becomes convinced that the real Gamamon is the imposter, and the imposter is the real Gamamon. Then Gamamon in tears because his best friend in the world, Hero, who's like an older brother to him, is saying that he's not who he is, flies off in the rain to this park. And this other Digimon we've never seen before, don't know who he is, shows up, and he's like, "Oh, so it's happening to you as well. Everyone's forgotten me. They've replaced me, and soon, once everyone's forgotten me, I'll just disappear." And Gamamon looks down at his hands, is like, "I'll disappear." And when he looks up, that Digimon's just fucking gone. And you never hear about it. The episode never comes around to like reveal like, no, because we defeated the weird doppelganger Digimon, that like one Digimon that disappeared in the rain in like a fit of depression, he gets to come back. It's like, no, when bad shit happens, like people die in the show, Digimon die, it is like dark and fucked up. There's a whole episode that's a riff on the Junji Ito classic horror manga Uzumaki, where you're at like a seaside town in Japan and these like surreal events start occurring revolved around spirals, which is what Uzumaki means, and like things start spiraling. If people know that manga, you'll know the like really iconic panel where a girl, like a spiral starts gouging into a girl's skull. It's very graphic in that manga. This does not get into the graphic stuff. But you do have like this Digimon that starts causing things to randomly start curling and spiraling, and starts with people's like hair. It's like, oh, weird, I can't like kind of straighten my hair. Then eventually it's like, oh, weird, like street lamps start curling around and stuff like that. Then eventually you get shit like, you know that the Slinky dog in Toy Story, that's like where the middle is very long. You get like a dog on the street that just starts stretching out, and its middle part just starts curling around on itself. And then eventually there's a little girl in the town who's like the guest star of the episode, and her like limbs start stretching, and her arms and legs start folding in on themselves, and it's like very fucked up. You just get shit where people are like poisoned by poisonous spider Digimon, and they're like screaming out in pain. Oh god, the most fucked up one is the mushroom one, where there's like a mushroom Digimon that start kidnapping women on their fucking wedding day and drag them into this like abandoned wedding hall that's like full of like cobwebs and shit in the middle of this forest, and like spread spores on these women so that mushrooms start growing out of their skin, because for these mushroomon, which is what they're called, mushroomon, the mushrooms made from humans who are at like the moment of incredible bliss is more tasty than other mushroom. And so it's why they're kidnapping brides on their fucking wedding day. And then they start ripping the mushrooms off their skin and start eating them. This is also Junji Ito manga reference, this episode. But when they're doing it, it's like, it's so gross. There's no blood or anything, but the sound effects of them ripping away the mushroom and these people screaming as it happens. And it happens to the three main characters as well. You know, your three little kids who are your little heroes of the show also get fucking kidnapped by the mushroomon, get spores spread on them, grow mushrooms, and have them violently ripped off their bodies while they scream in pain and horror. Like, this show does not pull its punches, and it's so well done. Just on the level of writing, of production, like editing, storyboarding. I mean, it's incredibly rare that you get a miss in the like 67 episodes after you get past that first core. Once the show locks in, I think like each episode, it's almost all banger after banger. The ones that are really good are like incredibly good. There's so many of them. And it's just a hugely satisfying show. And then that's on top of like the main characters are really entertaining. The voice cast is great. In particular, you've got Sawashiro Miyake playing Gamamon. And I'll come back to some of the stuff with her in a second. You have Nakai Kazuya, Rono Ozawa himself, who plays Angoramon, who is one of the main Digimon, who's like a big bunny rabbit guy who kind of transforms into a samurai when he digivolves. And most episodes end with him doing a goofy little like samurai poem, which is very fun because it reminds me of Ghost of Tsushima, where he plays Sakai Jin in that game if you play the Japanese dub, and you get to make your little poems. And they're a lot like that. And everyone's like, what the fuck are you talking about? At the end of every episode is a great one running gag. And then the another great character is Jellymon, voiced by Shimamura Yu, who is this little jellyfish Digimon that she's great because she's just like trying to scam people. Like she just wants to like, it's constantly coming with like get rich quick schemes for the other Digimon that come into the world. And she like one episode, she sets up a like, for people who have trouble sleeping, like you come here and we'll help you sleep. And she has a little Digimon that's supposed to give you good dreams, but if that Digimon gets like stressed, it gives you horrible nightmares. And that's the plot of that episode. Jellymon's great. And for the human characters, in particular, one that really stands out is one of the lead three. This is Jellymon's partner, is Higashi Mitarai Kiyoshiro, who's a very ridiculous name for a character, voiced by Ishida Akira himself, Arthur and Zala from Gundam Seed, etc., etc., Akaza from Kimetsu Yaiba, and he is your, like, Shaggy from Scooby-Doo, absolute coward, like, is horrified at everything that happens. You know, he never wants to go investigate any of the cases, and so him being paired up with this, like, slightly sadistic, very materialistic Digimon with Jellymon just creates a lot of the comedy and kind of the comic relief in the show. It's a great pairing of characters. But the star of the show in terms of characters is absolutely Gamamon, voiced by Suashiro Miyuki, who, in the tradition of a character like Guilmon from Digimon Tamers, is this is my lead Digimon, but there's something kind of off about them. And they, like, feel like, most of the time, it's adorable little kid. He's basically written like he's the main character hero's this, like, 6-year-old little brother. He's like a little boy who loves chocolate and all this stuff. And Suashiro Miyuki it has so much fun just making this character as adorable as humanly possible. And Gamamon's just the best. Like, speaks in this very kind of broken Japanese that sounds like someone learning how to talk. It's awesome. But Gamamon does conceal, like, a darker secret, which is that there is this evil version of him. In the long tradition of Digimon, where one of the main Digimon has, like, a dark, quote-unquote, evolution, you have this other version of Gamamon called Gulus Gamamon that's, like, a big version, a very lean, big kind of dinosaur humanoid with, like, a sick cape. He's black and purple. And Gulus Gamamon is this sort of, like, evil creature that ultimately the overarching plot, when you tap into it, which again, it's a very light part of the show, there's not a lot of overarching plot episodes, but it revolves around Gurus Gamamon, and he seems in some way responsible for causing these incidents where Digimon are coming into the world. And it's not clear how he exists, what his relationship with Gamamon is. He has, like, such a completely opposite personality to regular Gamamon. Gamamon has no conscious understanding that this entity exists, and it only pops up in a couple of episodes. The first time it pops up, I believe it's episode 12, when one of the guest star Digimon who's been in a couple of episodes gets killed by a Digimon assassin. It's a pretty crazy scene where he throws a fucking knife into this little Digimon's head. It's, like, kind of fucked up. And Gamamon freaks out. It's the first time he's ever seen death. He digivolves into this evil version, Gudis Gamamon. And the way that Suashiro Miyuki just chews the fucking scenery with this character, it's so good. It is just like, it feels like she binge watched Nozawa Masako playing Goku Black in Dragon Ball Super. It's like, I want to do that shit. And it's so good. It's just this utterly sumptuous performance. You hang on every syllable, and she's just so deliciously evil and arrogant and just, like, is so much more powerful until the end of the show. For every other character you see when Gudis Gamamon comes out, it's just no contest. He's just sadistically toying with any enemy he confronts, and it's just, oh my god, every time it happens, it makes me want to just stop watching and go get my best pair of headphones and put that on, because it's like, it's such a juicy performance. And one of the best parts of the show is when you do get to the end, and it ends with, like, a 3-parter where you go to the digital world, you kind of unraveled the mystery of how and why is all this happening with Digimon invading our world, you kind of fully confront the reality of Gurus Gamamon as this villain and find out, like, where and how he exists. He's trying to get to the heart of the digital world, destroy the kind of Digimon god that rules this digital world. And then there is one Digimon I think he's called Royal Bloom Nightmon or something like that. It's like this, like, paladin knight kind of looking Digimon. Shows up and is, like, this guard to the Digimon god at the center of this world. And Gudis Gamamon shows up and starts fighting him. And this Lord Bloommon, or whatever his name is voiced by fucking Ikeda Shuichi, Char himself.
Fuck!
And it is, like, the best, just, like, 5 minutes of voice acting you have ever heard of these two people trying to overact each other and just lean into it so hard. And Ikeda Shuichi's just, like, going so deep in his kind of gravelly, older voice he has now, and just saying shit like, oh, so you are the one we have heard of known as the Dark conqueror, but obviously like shikoku no ho to you monoka. And it's just, and then you get Miyuki Sawashiro just sadistically laughing in his face. Oh my God. Oh my fucking God. It's so good.
Okay, Sean, the podcast is over. I gotta go watch Digimon Story, Digimon Ghost Game. Fuck this. No more podcast. Just Digimon. This sounds great.
Yeah, because again, like the main plot stuff, it's not why you should watch the show. It's very light, but the couple of times it does it, because it's all revolved around Gurus Gamamon, it just punches so hard, and it's like Sawashiro Miyuki just gives such an incredible performance. And there's a part where she has to play like 5 or 6 different voices in one episode, because obviously the voice actors stick with every time the character digivolves. So Gamamon has all these other versions as he becomes more powerful, and each one is kind of like he ages up a little bit. So his regular one, Battle Gamamon, he's like a teen, and then he turns into kind of like a bigger dragon, he's kind of like an adult, and then his ultimate or like mega form, Siriusmon, is like the kind of almost godlike, kind of ultimate powerful entity. And so she has to play in one episode like all of those versions, including 2 different versions of Gurus Gamamon, and it's a really like acting tour de force when you're in Gamamon's like mind palace, basically. But yeah, it's a great show. And one thing that is very frustrating, though, is that it is not recognized for the greatness it deserves, because fuckers online just don't know how to appreciate episodic television, and it drives me fucking crazy. Because if you look at a bunch of reviews for this show, there are people who are like me. There absolutely are fans out there that are like, Ghost Game is one of the best Digimon shows, which I think is absolutely true. It's up there with Digimon Adventure 1 and Tamers. As far as I'm concerned, it might be better than both of those. Like, it's really, truly very good. But there are so many people that just trash the show because they're like, oh, the plot is rushed at the end. It's like, oh, it's all filler. I'm like, fucking Jesus goddamn Christ.
The word filler has been drained of all. We've had this conversation before. People literally do not know what it means anymore. They just, yeah.
Yeah, and it just drives me crazy. I made the horrible mistake after I watched the show, and I was on such a high getting all the shit with the Shuichi and Sawashiro Miyuki. I'm like, this is so good. Because I should mention that, like, the animation is fantastic. Like, it's such a well-produced show. It is shocking to me that it is as good as it is for a show that is a, like, weekly show running for...
Well, it's after Toei's, like, renewal in the late 2010s. So, like, they've been on such fire with all of their different productions in the last few years.
Yeah. So, like, when you have, not every episode has a lot of action, but when you do have episodes that have action, there's some, like, really great stuff. And the last 3 episodes have amazing action, animation, and choreography and stuff. So I was on a huge high off the show, and I was like, I just can't fathom, why is this show not rated the way it's deserved? It's like a 6 something on fucking My Anime List and those kind of bullshit websites. And I made the mistake of typing Digimon Ghost Game into YouTube and seeing like one of the first video essay responses that came up that's like a dude smirking. It's like, Ghost Game, what went wrong? And I watched like 5 minutes of it, and my brain started to melt, and I had to turn it off. And it was, I don't want to like subtweet any specific douche on the internet or whatever, but like he just started saying the stupidest shit I've ever heard, where he was like, some people who really evangelize the show are always going on about how the people who don't like it just don't understand what episodic television is. But those are the people who don't understand what episodic television is, because episodic television can be shows like, The X-Files and The Office and How I Met Your Mother. And I was just like, what? And he started going into an argument about you can have your arcs and the episodes that fit in the larger arcs. And I'm just like, stop. Why the fuck is your reference point for episodic anime The Office and How I Met Your Mother? 2 fucking American live-action sitcoms. Like, fucking, there's more than one way to skin a fucking cat. There's more than one way to structure a show. It's fine to have your, we've got episodes that fit into larger arcs. It's also fine to have, 90% of every anime that was ever made, which is each episode is a totally standalone episode, and there's a very, like Ultraman or something, there's a very slight arc, so that way when you get to the end, you can have a definitive climax and conclusion to the show, because they're designed to run for about 50 episodes, most of these kinds of shows. But the history of anime is paved with shows that are pure one-off episodes where each episode is a totally standalone story that are not building up to any larger arc, and they're some of the best anime ever made. Why do you have to fucking talk about The Office, you dipshit?
I'm going to assume this was like an American white guy speaking English, and you were not going into like the Japanese fandom, but the uneducated American fandom who, who think that The Office and various anime are the same thing and can just be easily compared. Yeah.
At the very least, compare it to Courage the Cowardly Dog as a, horror cartoon. That also is all standalone episodes. I've never heard anyone say that Courage the Cowardly Dog is a bad cartoon because it doesn't have an overarching plot line. That's just...
I mean, you would if it came out today. That's the problem, is that people are fucking idiots today, and if it doesn't fit in the Wikipedia summary, it's not real. This is like one of the first points I make in my classes now all the time, is that like, if all you needed from a film was what could be written down in the Wikipedia summary, then film wouldn't have to exist. We're talking about all the other stuff.
Yeah. So again, Digimon Ghost Game. I love the show. I think it's great. If you have any interest in this kind of like short horror animation, like, you got to watch this show. Again, note that the first 10 or so episodes is the show finding itself, and it feels like they kind of push the boundaries a little bit. Once you get to the episode where Guru's Gamamon shows up, which is the end of Core 1, that is like a clear turning point. And I just think there's a clear like core structure where they saw, by core structure I mean COUR core, where they tried it out. This is kind of their first set of episodes they designed. They saw, oh, these episodes, like there's a Pumpkinmon episode, a Halloween one in that first batch that's really good, that's very fucked up, where there's a part where the main character gets a pumpkin thrown at his head, and then Pumpkinmon starts stabbing a fucking knife as he's carving the pumpkin, but it's on the main character's head. You have like a camera shot inside the pumpkin as you see the knife stab in and almost go into his eyeball. And it feels like the show is so energized in that episode. And it's like, look at the crazy shit we can get away with in this kids show. And they run with those couple of episodes. But yeah, if you're interested in this kind of show, absolutely watch Ghost Game. And very briefly, I do want to touch on, because I have watched the first course so far of Digimon Beatbreak, which is the currently airing show, which is also quite good. It's a very different kind of Digimon. It's a little bit more traditional in some ways. And I guess it's different in others. It's more traditional in that it's structurally, it's much more of a, yes, most episodes are Monster of the Week episodes, but they much more clearly tie into a longer story thread, longer character arcs that the characters are going through. It is broadly similar in structure to something like a Digimon Adventure or Tamers in that respect. Where it's different is it feels like it is pulling from things like Cyber Sleuth, where it is intentionally aiming for an older demographic. Ghost Game, for as fucked up as it can get in places, is still aesthetically something like a Yokai Watch or Gundam Age or something like that. It's very clearly living in and aiming towards a younger demographic. Beatbreak is clearly aiming for older teens, young adults that are into Digimon. Again, it's very much modeled off of something like Cyber Sleuth stylistically and aesthetically, which I would also say Cyber Sleuth is aiming for that older audience. It's not a game designed for 8 to 10-year-old kids. And so Beatbreak, it's a very good version of that, and I do think it's got a really strong story. And in particular, the main Digimon, Gekkomon, who is voiced by Han Megumi, which you have to be careful with how you say it. So he's a little gecko, and you have to call him Gekkomon. You have to extend that vowel out, because there's already a Digimon from the original Digimon called Gekkomon that's a little gecko dude with a big trombone, or like a tuba, I think actually it is. And it's very funny that they wanted a little lizard gecko-looking Digimon, and they're like, well, we already have one of those, because there's thousands of Digimon. And it's like, oh, fuck it. It's not Gekkomon, it's Gekkomon. But that character's voiced by Han Megumi, whom we know and love here. Who's like Salem Ass in the Gundam The Origin, for instance. And it's a really good, fun character in performance. And the main story, it's all revolves around like AI and stuff in this kind of near future dystopian society where people's lives are kind of controlled by these little things they called Sapotama, which are these little like egg-looking devices that have like a quote-unquote AI in them that kind of controls your whole life and tells you when to wake up, where to go, what to eat for breakfast, like when should you exercise, and all this kind of stuff. And it's like run by some sort of evil fucking cyberpunk corporation. And so that's the sort of vibe. And when things go wrong with the Sabotama, they kind of explode and Digimon come out of them. And the corporation that runs these things then basically tries to hunt down those Digimon. And either you are, if it happens to your Sabotama and you end up kind of birthing in a weird way these Digimon, they will kind of eliminate you, or you can become what they call a cleaner and use your Digimon as a kind of, and become a sort of bounty hunter to deal with these other Digimon related cases. That's what happens to the main character, and he ends up joining this group of other cleaners called Glowing Dawn that are like trying to use their powers to kind of slowly work against this evil corporation and try to protect the Digimon, not just kill them. And they have like a nursery where they bring the Digimon back to and kind of try to take care of them. And it's a cool setup. It's a very good setting. The characters are cool. And the first core is a very satisfying viewing experience because it builds to like a very clear conclusion for that kind of arc. And then they start a next arc in the next episode. So it's a show I'm excited to just kind of watch week to week because I think that'll be a fun way to watch it. But that's my Digimon adventure, pun intended.
But not that Digimon adventure, different
Yes.
Digimon adventure.
This is my Digimon adventure 03 because I watched 3 things. They haven't made that show yet.
They've made a third Digimon Adventure show. It's just not Digimon Adventure 03.
Yes, exactly. I mean, because they did the thing where they did the kind of modern version of it, where Tamara Mutsumi, who's in all 3 of these shows, also plays the recast for, I forget, I think Koichi, I want to say his name is in Japanese. It's Izzy in the English dub for the original Digimon Adventure. So she's in that one as well. Tamara Mutsumi is like every Digimon thing. I assume she's a massive Digimon fan. It's the only thing that explains it to me. That she must be very aggressively seeking out opportunities to be in Digimon shows because she's in like almost all of them. It's hilarious.
She just calls her agent every day and says,
Yes.
remember, you've got one job. Get me Digimon jobs. And he's
Exactly.
like, all right, I got it, ma'am.
Yep.
And you know what? Doing a good job.
Absolutely.
Getting her a lot of Digimon
and she's
jobs.
doing a great job because she's really good in all those things.
Absolutely. All right. Well, then, do you want to move on to the monthly 10 to finish off this
Yes.
episode, Sean? All
Let's
right.
move on to the monthly 10, which is a very not at all depressing list of things to talk about.
Well, that's the thing. So I challenged you to do what I said was the top 10 things we could do to make the podcast more popular in the new year, 2026, but that you and I would both absolutely hate. So things that would make us fucking miserable, but would make us greater success as podcasters. And my only question there was, is Sean going to make this funny or depressing or some mix of the two? So let's find out.
I think it's some mix of the two. Jonathan, I will tell you up front that part of this was me I did 2 very fateful Google searches that informed this podcast, which one was just, how do I make my podcast popular? And there's a lot of ideas on the internet. And the other one was, what are the most popular podcasts? And that is a Google search no person should make because the results are horrifying. You don't want to see
How
what the most
many of
popular podcasts
those? How many of those are basically about Nazi ideology of like the top 10?
Almost all of them.
Well, you know what? I am perfectly happy having fewer listeners if we're just talking about anime.
Yes.
Yeah.
So my list here is a mix of hopefully some things that are funny, and is definitely some things that are depressing when you reflect on the nature of the world. But you can all rest assured that we're not going to do this shit. Starting with number 10, this is the one that probably like, it wouldn't be that big of a deal, but I can't see ourselves ever doing it. But it was like the number one thing recommended on the how do I make my podcast more popular. And I thought it was like interesting that this was like the big thing everything list said. Yeah, what is it?
Is it do video? Is it pivot to video? Okay,
my number 10 is make it a video podcast. That was like every fucking site I saw that was trying to give recommendations on how to make your podcast popular was make it a video podcast. And I'm like, what the fuck? It's a podcast, motherfuckers. I don't need to look at no video of people talking. I just want to listen to the people talking, please.
Well, and this is there's been a lot of conversation about this lately because it's crazy because from what we can tell, yes, doing it as a video does make it more popular, but we also have like YouTube data that shows most people who watch quote unquote a video podcast have it on in the background.
Yeah.
So like they like click away from the video and listen to it as audio. I can say for me, definitely, there's plenty of podcasts I listen to now that have a video version. And even if I go listen to it on YouTube, I put it on YouTube and then I turn my phone off and put it in my pocket and I'm listening on my headphones and I listen to it as audio. So like, look, you and I come from a different generation when podcasts were on iPods and like that's why they're called that. And so that's the kind of podcast we want to make. I just don't get my assumption is that this happens because the YouTube algorithm recommends stuff with video but it's not because people organically want it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like, because I will say that, there are some things that are effectively podcasts that I do end up listening to that are on YouTube, but honestly, a lot of them aren't quote unquote videos in the sense that it's not a video of the people talking. It's mostly things like, for instance, this is a good example because they just started doing it again. The Kaguya-sama Love is War kind of anime radio podcast basically thing, which is very, very funny that they did for many years. They've brought it back because there's new Kaguya-sama Love is War stuff coming out. And that is it is technically a video, but it is just a picture of the logo for the show, and then Kaguya and Chika and art of those two characters, because it's the voice actors who play those two characters that are on the show. And it's just like a 30-minute thing of them talking and discussing topics vaguely related to the show and like the concept of romance. And it's very funny. And I listen to it, but I'm not like sitting there staring at the fucking logo. And the idea.
Well, that's how our podcast comes out.
Yes.
We have everything goes on YouTube, and other than like the theme song for Japanimation Station, it's a static image, and those do pretty well on YouTube depending on the topic. But like, I just don't feel the need to add anything more. I don't know what it would add, really.
Yeah. And to be clear, the things that these websites are recommending aren't just have a logo and you're like you're uploading it to YouTube. They're saying like, get a camera and film yourselves talking and blah, blah, blah. It's like, why? It's like, sure, if you have all that production set up because you're making other kinds of videos already, maybe you might as well do it. I guess it's probably in that situation might not be all that much more work, but it's a weird piece of advice to me to give people as like what do you want to do to make your podcast more popular? It's like, oh well, you got to record yourself on video talking when you put up your podcast. I don't think that's actually that big of a deal, and we're not going to do it. All right, number 9. Start an intense, dedicated social media presence on X, Instagram, and TikTok that aggressively promotes the podcast at any given opportunity.
Okay, so here's the thing. If I had the time to do it, I believe this would make the show more popular on TikTok and Instagram, and I'm considering launching a dedicated Japanimation Station Instagram for the new season because I think it would be good to post there and on Threads. But X, that's stupid. X does not drive traffic to fucking anything because they for one, they suppress it unless you pay them. But also, I don't want Japanimation Station associated with child porn, so I'm not going to do anything on X. But yeah, that's I believe it would help, but it would also we would need more time in our lives or a dedicated social media manager because it's a lot of work. Even for the minimal social media presence I do, it's a lot of work to get stuff posted around.
Yeah, and this is not even that. This is where I'm you're Google you're typing, not Googling, but searching for anything related to, if we're talking about the fucking Spider-Man movie or something, you're typing in Spider-Man, and every single person who posted something about it, you're like, oh, you like Spider-Man? Why not check out this podcast? Right? Because you definitely see that shit online where it's every opportunity this dude is trying to grift whatever content they've made, and you're like, holy shit. There's a level at which it's a good thing to do if you can have the time and the conditions to do it, but there's an extent to which it is done sometimes where I think it is actively off-putting to a potential audience to be yeah, you should check this out, it's great, and every oh, you like this thing too, well, we did this also. There's a kind of puppy dog enthusiasm to it that can be very annoying.
Yeah, look, if I had infinite time, I probably would put out excerpts of the show in different places and stuff like that. But that is, I don't think people realize how time consuming that is. The shows that do that have dedicated social media people who are able to watch the podcast and also have an outsider's eye to figure out what is going to be popular, what we can clip out, all of that stuff. Oh my God. This is podcasting as an industrial thing, not a fun little fan thing the way it was when we were young.
Exactly. All right, number 8, because those first two, those are not too bad. Number 8, this is where I think it starts getting this would be really terrible. Base every topic we cover on Google Trends and make sure we clearly enunciate multiple times per episode the key words on Google Trends most closely associated with that topic so that the AI can pick it up.
So this would have precluded us from doing multiple episodes on Persona 4 when we were with We Got This Covered, and they told us not to do that, but we did it anyway? That kind of thing? Yeah. No, you and I do not go in this direction, my friend.
Yeah, this is probably one of the most alien notions to us because we purely base the podcast on what we're enthusiastic about and what we want to talk about.
Yeah.
And not if it can line up with something that like works in like a broader market way, that's great. But we're not like searching on like, this is the hot button thing to talk about. It's like, we got to do the K-pop Demon Hunters podcast and put out a cover version of the most popular song.
Yeah, no. Well, and you know what? It would also preclude things we've done that have been successful. Weekly Suit Gundam would not have existed if we'd followed Google Trends, but that's like the most popular thing we've ever done. So, you know, it's stupid.
And my favorite one, though, was like when I was reading, because this comes from one of the lists of how do you make your podcast more popular, and it was the specific advice, and make sure you're clearly enunciating into the microphone the key words associated with the topic. And I'm like, oh, Jesus fucking Christ, just kill me now, please. I can't do it. All right.
Anyway, this podcast is brought to you by The Housemaid, starring Sydney Sweeney and Amanda Seyfried, in theaters now.
Yeah. Thank you, Jonathan.
I've seen that movie big on Instagram. There's a lot of Insta ads for that movie, so there we go.
All right, number 7. This is one of the funnier ones. We canceled Japanimation Station and we changed it into the Anime Whisperer, an anime-themed ASMR podcast where we gently whisper about anime-related topics into the microphone to help otaku relax. Because this is of the like not horrifying neo-Nazi podcasts, ASMR podcasts are some of those popular podcasts around, Jonathan. And I know that we're not like women with husky voices, but I think we can get close enough that we have an audience we can serve.
I don't know about that. Here's the thing. This one wouldn't make me feel morally wrong in any way. There's nothing wrong with this. It would just be weird and awkward for us. Two guys with very loud voices.
I think this very literally follows your prompt of it could, well, you know, maybe it wouldn't make us more positive, but it could at least like there would be a burst of like, what the fuck is this? I think, but it definitely would make us fucking miserable specifically do the podcast. If other people want to do the Anime Whisperer, please take that name. I love that name. Please name your anime ASMR podcast the Anime Whisperer. It probably exists somewhere, but I just love that name.
I do listen to a lot of ASMR. I think there's a lot of very, very talented ASMR creators. I think it's a cool genre. I do not think, and I have never thought for 1 second in my life that I could do it. I don't think I could pull it off.
Yeah, I would feel very self-conscious doing something like that. Yeah.
So, Sean, what's the next item on our top 10 list for the month?
Number 6 is start our new Finance and Economics podcast. This is most definitely financial advice featuring Jonathan Lack.
Wait, where's your name on it?
I thought I'd throw you under the bus in case there's a lot.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, that sounds really legally dicey. Okay. I would also not be good at giving financial advice. I mean, to be fair, most of the people with podcasts like this are not good at it either. If you follow their financial advice, you will be in ruin. But I also don't have the shameless hustle in me to just scam people.
Yes, but this is like, this is one of the most popular genres of podcast, and I just can't imagine a format I would least trust to get financial advice through than financial podcasts. It's just a realm of fucking grifters top to bottom. I'm sure that there are good ones out there, but it's just there's so many that are clearly like basically get rich quick bullshit schemes that I'm sure we're very enthusiastic about cryptocurrency and we're like hot on the fucking GameStop, stock market bullshit. It's just like, oh my God, I couldn't deal with it.
Yeah, I think financial advice is kind of like medical advice on the internet. If you're getting any of it, and I mean any amount on the internet, you're doing it wrong. Yes. Go talk to a doctor. Go talk to an accountant who is a fiduciary. Like, there are experts who can give you great advice. They are not online. They are not online.
All right, number 5. Start a new segment for Purely Academic that we call The Monthly Word, where we read through and very literally interpret each book of the Bible month by month.
So we make a pivot to Christian content.
Exactly, because it's hot right now. It's very hot right now, and none of them seem normal. It's not like regular, and we're, kind of exploring the Bible and thinking about the lessons we can learn. It's a lot of and this is why dinosaurs are a fabrication by the science elite, and that, so on and so forth. And we're going to talk today a lot about how evolution isn't real.
Oh my God. There's a version of this that could be very interesting from a literary and theological bent. I would listen to a version of this from trustworthy sources. It's just like the financial advice one. I think it would be hard to find online. I think those people are at their church hosting like local study sessions, not making podcasts to grift you with, MailChimp subscriptions or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just, it's one of the genres where it's a very thick mist of like bullshit and scams for you to try to find if there's something out there that's legit. This next one, I'm realizing I should have not ranked this high. I think I forgot to remove this one, but I'm just going to leave it here anyways. My number 4, make a new true crime podcast, which we call Addicted to Crime, with Jonathan Lack and Sean Chapman.
That podcast has to exist, right? That's... I'm looking on YouTube right now for Addicted to Crime.
I didn't bother to look up if it existed. I just love the name of like the most horrifically inappropriate title for a true crime podcast ever, which captures, I don't have an issue with true crime podcasts in theory existing. It's the like capital machine of the true crime podcast as like one of the most definitively popular thing out there that I find very grotesque at a certain point, and I don't think anything captures that as well as naming your podcast Addicted to Crime.
My number 1 YouTube result for this was a 1998 rap song by Badass AZZ called Addicted to Crime from his album Word on the Streets.
We could make that the theme song to our podcast. We just got to throw him a couple bucks.
Okay, so here's the thing, Sean. I could imagine actually enjoying doing a true crime show if you and I just got on here and confidently bullshitted. We just made stuff up. Because I'm pretty confident that's what most true crime shows are to begin with. But we just like, Sean, did you learn about the fucking serial killer? What serial killer? No, I mean Cereal. He would stuff Fruit Loops down someone's throat until they choked to death. And we just go through that and we talk about all the stuff we learned on Reddit that we didn't actually see on Reddit. That actually probably would be a pretty popular show.
And everyone who met him thought that Alexander Brigham Ellsworth was the most normal man they'd ever met. But what they didn't suspect was what lied beneath the surface.
See, this would be one of the easier ones to do because it's such a well-worn format.
Yeah, you're right. If we made a fake true crime podcast called Addicted to Crime, that actually is a pretty great idea for podcast. I'll save that for when you give me the opposite of this list of 1 or 10 things we could do to make the podcast more popular. That also would be really fun. All right.
Yeah, when we get bored of anime, we'll replace Japan Animation Station with Addicted to Crime.
Yes. I do love that name for a podcast so much. It's a name so good it needs a podcast for it.
Yes.
Anyways, we're in the top 3, and the top 3 are the ones that are horrifying. Number 3, I think in some ways this would be the one that would make us the most miserable. And I wrote this one down before this most recent week, and this is just straight up cover the actual news. Like when I asked you, Jonathan, what's happening in the news, and we actually have to talk about it in depth every single week, this would be the thing that would make us more miserable than anything on this list.
And look, this is what I actually listen to. Like, people sometimes ask, what podcast do we listen to? Most of my podcast is like news and like, just daily news and information and stuff like that. I don't listen to a lot of entertainment or video game podcasts and stuff like that. And it does make me miserable just being a listener. And it theoretically shouldn't, because listening to the news, I think, is good for you. It's good to be an informed citizen. It just so happens right now that being an informed citizen means knowing the absolute worst things in the world happening every day. And Sean, if you and I came home from fucking work from our jobs, and then got on and just talked about the news together every week, we wouldn't last that long.
Yeah, I think it would be one thing if it was our job and we didn't have like other things we're doing, then I could see it. But yes, it would just, I don't think we would last very long as like psychological entities in the world. We'd have some sort of mental breakdown. But
Sean, the tone of your what's going on in the news, Jonathan, would be really different.
Exactly.
So, what's going on in the news? I can't do this. Yes. That's what it would be.
Then you just hear a click, and then we never upload another podcast again. It's over. I do have to say, mad respect to the leftists out there that do this. It's like we need people out there that do it, and do a good job at it. But man, it's like it can't be me, not right now. All right, number 2. We abandon just recording our own podcasts, and instead we make 1 billion podcast episodes just using AI voices based on any and every topic possible and completely flood the market with them.
Yeah, so this would be what we would be scraping like Google Trends
Yes.
and then like AI generating scripts and then using AI voices to create them. And it wouldn't be you and I getting together as friends on Sundays to talk. It would be you and I just secluded at home,
Yes.
furiously clicking at our keyboard to get ChatGPT to do the work for us.
Yes, and it's it's that strategy of it doesn't matter if we make a million shitty podcasts that nobody listens to, if we end up the one that somehow gets viral and nobody can understand why we fucking listened or watched it, but it gets like a million fucking views, and it's just that grift, which is just like 90% of YouTube. It is maybe the only like really huge gripe I have with the user interface on the PlayStation 5 is when you go to the like media tab, or if I want to watch YouTube on my TV, I do it through my PS5. The like YouTube tab at the bottom has all these recommendations, but they're not recommendations from your account. They're generic recommendations for YouTube, and it's just every one is some fake AI like trailer for Black Panther 7. It's like movies that don't exist, or the ones that are really annoying are when like you do know that there's going to be a trailer for like Spider-Man whatever eventually, and it's like Spider-Man blah 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 home, and you're like, oh, is that the title of that movie? And I'm like about to look at like, no, you fuckers. And it's just it's everything. It's just everything. It's constant. I would be fascinated to see what is the percentage of all YouTube videos uploaded in a year at this point that are like basically AI bullshit advertising things that don't actually exist, because it has to be a staggering percentage.
A very depressing percentage. Once upon a time, I think I posted this to Twitter back in the day, like pre-Elon Musk, but this was a couple of years ago when there was an iPhone update where the new version of iOS had a feature. This was, to be clear, not advertised as like an AI do-it-yourself thing. It was an accessibility option, but you could record your voice and give it a couple, it would ask you to read a couple of things, and you'd go for like 10 minutes, and then it would create like an AI voice of your own. And I think the intention was for people who might be losing their voice or as an accessibility disability kind of thing. And you could like type something in and it would come out in your voice. But I tried it, and because there's a large database of my voice online with the podcast and stuff, and I created the voice and then I fed it the first like minute of one of our podcasts as a transcript, and I cut it together with your voice, and it was very eerie. It sounded so bad. It only very vaguely sounded like me, and it terrified me. So I do not want to do this, Sean.
Yes, I think this would kill our souls, but not as much as the number one, which is probably very predictable. I wrote it down as soon as you gave me this topic because it's the honest answer that this would be the thing that by far would get us the most popularity, and it would be the day we die. Is completely sell our souls to the devil and just make a hard swing into ultra right-wing politics. And there's no bigger guarantee to popularity online than just fucking plugging your nose up and jumping into the fucking deep end of the shit pool, motherfuckers, and just doing that grift and telling people how much women are evil and you gotta hate, minorities, and we gotta deport every fucking person who lives in the world, and how the earth is also flat, and also evolution doesn't exist. There's a lot of crossover between this one and the monthly word of literal Bible interpretation one. God, we have to have that traditional wife stuff. It's like, man, there's not enough people in our prisons. Have you ever thought that to yourself? If we just went all the way into it, it would kill us, but man, we'd get a lot more listeners. Just not the listeners you'd ever want to fucking talk to.
No, because they're the listeners who, if you ever then grew a tiny sliver of a conscience and pushed back on something, like Ben Shapiro has in recent weeks against all the Candace Owens, like, anti-Semitism Charlie Kirk stuff, you would then immediately get just a flood of death threats and no one would listen to your show anymore because they would go to the further right-wing person, which is exactly what Ben Shapiro has deserved. He has gotten exactly the audience he cultivated. He just likes to pretend it wasn't the audience he cultivated. But, yeah, you've got the key is to have no morality whatsoever or no capacity for shame. You have to be really good at it. You have to be a sociopath. You have to be Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, genuinely have no human emotions or capacity for such. Then you can do it and be very successful. Sadly, neither you or I are sociopaths.
Yes, unfortunately, we've just got that little fucking thing called the moral compass, and it's like, there are some days where I'm like, man, it'd just be convenient if I didn't have this fucking thing hanging over my shoulder. But fuck, it's still there. God damn it. Nope, I gotta still try to be a good person. Fuck.
Sean, to make a serious point, it is something as depressing as all this is to consider. I do think one thing to like give every individual some, motivation in the fight, in the resistance that has been happening and to come, is to ask yourself if you could do it for a like do this thought exercise and be like, what if I did just sell out and be like, and think about how miserable you would be on the inside, and then go, you know what? I would feel a lot worse than I do right now. And that tells you you're still human and you're still okay.
Yeah, it's like I just can't imagine anything more soul crushing than this idea of just being one of those motherfuckers, and it's like, and unfortunately we're just in a moment where those motherfuckers are very much benefited by the techno-fascist internet landscape we live in, but I do believe that fucking, wheel will turn, the wheel of fortune will turn once more, and those people will be in the shit end of the pool, and we'll have a much better world to live in. I do think that will occur at some point. I just wish it happened sooner. It would just, man, it'd be so nice if it happened really sooner, though. It's like, fuck, it's been a while.
Because, man, Sean, if we were to do that this week, we would have to be defending the murder of completely innocent, unarmed civilians. We would have to be defending the proliferation of X with child porn. We would have to be defending the Epstein file. We would basically have to be pro-pedophilia at this point, because you have to be pro-Trump, who's pedophile. You have to be pro-Jeffrey Epstein and all of that stuff. You have to be pro-Elon Musk and all the pedophilia he's unleashed. You have to be pro all of that now, even though the movement was supposedly anti that just a few months ago, I should say. Man, I really don't know how, unless you are a genuine sociopath, how you do this.
Yes, that there's like no, there's just no line these people will not cross, because you're absolutely right. That is the thing after this week that just makes it so apparent that, like, just, federal officers murdering people, just, nothing. It's just fucking water off their goddamn backs. And they are just, pedophilia. I mean, it's like, if we did this, we'd have an episode of the podcast. It'd be like, child pornography. Is it really that bad? And when you're in that position, that's the fucking argument you're making, it's like, what the fuck has happened to everything? So
and you say that and it sounds like a joke, except Megyn Kelly has been doing that literally recently. Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, there's no low to which these people will not stoop. And that's why it's, it's not a fun answer to this question, but it is the only honest number one for things that we could do to make the podcast more popular in 2026 that would make us fucking miserable. And the only kind of solace I guess we could take from it, or one of the pieces of solace we could take, is that some of those motherfuckers must be miserable about it too. I mean, they can't be happy. They never seem like they're happy. They don't seem like they've known what happiness is once in their fucking lives, because they just don't have a spine. They don't have ethics. They don't have like human relationships. They can't feel warmth. And so those people are living horrible fucking miserable existences. It just would be great if they didn't try to spread the misery onto every other person that lives on the planet too.
I do think, like, the seminal moment for understanding this is when Ben Shapiro had to get mad at the Wet Ass Pussy song, and you realized he didn't know women were supposed to get wet. And like, yes, that's the world you live in, Ben Shapiro. Okay, that tells us a lot about who you are, and I don't want your life. I do not want your life, Mr. Shapiro.
All right. Well, I've got...
You're trying to transition out of this.
I'm like, there's no fucking... there's no segue.
Speaking of wet ass pussy.
I would have to really change the top 10 I was going to give you to segue out of this. So we're just going to make a hard turn, because, Jonathan, I need to give you a top 10, and I almost had completely forgotten about it because we moved the podcast recording up, and then right before the podcast, I'm like, what the fuck is happening in February? And I looked it up. I was like, hell yes. One thing that's happening in February, Jonathan, is Resident Evil 9, or Resident Evil Requiem, or Resident Evil Requiem, however you want to say the title. That is releasing near the end of February. And so, Jonathan, I've got a fun Resident Evil-related top 10 list I want you to make. We've had a big resurgence of the franchise since Resident Evil 7, and Capcom's just been hitting it hard by just don't think like they are capitalizing on and exploiting the brand to its maximum profit potential. So what I want you to give me is a top 10 list of Resident Evil spin-offs that Capcom should make to capitalize on the brand in the late 2020s we are now in.
This is going to be fun. This is like the opposite of the one I gave you. I just get to imagine fun stuff and maybe some really dumb stuff, but dumb stuff can be fun too.
Yes, I'm. You've played most of the Resident Evil games, or at least like the main ones.
All of them, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that you've probably got some ideas of things that Resident Evil should have done, and probably some ideas that are probably terrible that Resident Evil shouldn't do, but they should do it anyways. And I'm very excited to see what you'll come up with.
I won't do this one because it's already something that exists, but the first thing that came to mind was Mario plus Rabbids and just Resident Evil plus Rabbids in my head.
We need those fucking crossover opportunities, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to see a rabbit get fucking horribly eaten to death by a horde of zombies. I think that'd be very fun.